Okay, there we go. All right, let me start this again. Good morning, Amberino. I'm glad you're here. I hope you're doing well. Amara Havchakar. I hope you're doing fine. Today is Friday, folks. We've kind of made it. Brittany's gone back to, because I blew her last name yesterday, so now she's just gone to Brittany L. All right, that's okay. That's okay, Brittany. I get it. Kate, good morning to you, my friend. Shari Mangara. Good morning to you. It's so good to see you here. Haley McGilvery is here in the house, and also Katie Werbowski is here. We've also got the award-winning Kayla Ducharme. And it looks like the email worked. Right on, Kayla. Leah is here. Good to see you here, Leah, and that beautiful picture of your dog. Our Elizabeth is here. And I hope all those resources worked for you, Elizabeth, that we sent to you. Glad you're here, Elizabeth. Margaret Caitlin is back with us today. Good news. I am glad you're here, Margaret. I'm glad everybody's well in your center and doing the best they can. So appreciate that. Megan is here with that beautiful picture of her and somebody else. That's lovely. And the other Megan with an H, Southern, is here with us this morning. Good to see you, Megan. Nicole Sumka is with us. God, I love your name. So you guys noticed that, right? You noticed that. And, of course, we heard her. We love her. It's Heidi Peterson. She's in the house today. And who could forget our Samantha Jolene, probably the best name of a student I've ever heard. I love that name. And Tatiana Mohammed. Again, beautiful little melody in those names. You guys have absolutely beautiful, beautiful names. So we're just going to do just a quick check-in. We're going to keep this on. It'll give you some time to get a coffee, get ready for when Joanna comes. I hope you had an interesting time yesterday going through those amazing resources that Joanna had shared with us. Boy, some of those really moved me. Some of them really, really affected me and made me think a lot. So I can't wait for the conversation today. There's some things I want to talk about, and I know you guys probably have some things to talk about too. And you probably know this because I think I mentioned it in diversity and inclusion, but my sister is Indigenous, and my mother was married to an Indigenous guy in the 50s. Which nobody did. And so Indigenous issues, Indigenous people have always been a very important part of my life. And I've done a lot of work in Indigenous communities, in Head Start programs out on the West Coast, the North Coast, and some Head Start programs in Ontario. And I'm always speaking at the Indigenous Head Start conference here in Winnipeg. So it is something I'm very passionate about. And again, I've got sort of family connections there. And I was raised in such a way to be very, very sensitive to the issues of Indigenous people because of my mother's history. So I'm excited about this. I'm looking forward to hearing what Joanna has to say, but I'm really looking forward to hearing what you folks have to say. And again, Joanna's very gentle. She's going to guide us through this in a very, very gentle way. And I think we're gonna learn a lot. Does anybody have a comment or something that sort of struck them from going through the resources yesterday? Anybody sort of brave enough to sort of turn on their mic and just mention something, or? All right, everybody's kind of quiet. That's okay. That's okay. How did you guys like Diana Rose's guest appearance yesterday and her? I couldn't get that what would love do out of my head all night. I don't know about you guys, but I couldn't get that out of my head. Part of it was, how come I never came up with it? And I just thought, damn, it's just so simple. Just such a how we interact with everybody, absolutely everybody in our sort of connections. So any thoughts out there about yesterday, either Diana Rosos or some of the resources that you guys went through?
I really like dynamics, and I didn't realize they had so many programs to offer, and I'm really interested in learning more about them and like potentially in the future looking for employment.
That's cool. Pardon me, I'm sorry, I cut you off.
Oh, no, okay.
That's cool, Tatiana. Yeah, and they seem to expand almost every year, offering different kinds of services. There's room for early childhood educators to be employed there, and I'm a big believer in us, yes, working in childcare centers, that's amazing. But I also think we have such a wisdom and such a scope of knowledge that we should be working in other places too. And a place like Family Dynamics is a beautiful place for us. For one thing, we've got a lot to offer, but holy smokes, what we will learn about the field, learn about families, learn about us. It's pretty darn amazing. I have a former student who, she just wanted to work at daycare. She was like from some country town just outside of Winnipeg. I forget which one. And then she took a chance and got a job at ERCOM, the newcomer agency here in Winnipeg, which has child-minding programs run by ECEs. And so they have all these newcomer families with kids that don't speak English. And she took that job, and now she's the coordinator for it. And I had a coffee with her last year, and she said, I never thought I'd ever have a job where I'm doing stuff with kids, doing stuff with families, and doing these massive multicultural barbecues for communities. So, Tatiana, that warms my heart. I hope that a lot of you guys sort of came away from that going, you know what, there's a lot more opportunities other than just daycare. Daycare's great, fantastic. But for myself, my own career, yeah, I worked in daycare. I worked in family resource. I worked in ECE resource. I even drove a van, like a bus, a big bus for a month that was a toy book lending library for the city of Toronto. And there's opportunities out there. There's opportunities. Are we brave enough to go and try it out? And oh my God, what ends up happening? So we got a lot of wisdom to share, and I hope that inspired folks to think about, think outside the box of what your employment possibilities are. So that's cool, Tatiana. Heidi, you were going to say something.
Yeah, in regards to the material there that we covered yesterday and for the guest speaker, Joe White, coming today, I really liked, and I put this into my little reflection thingamajiggy that we had done, said I really like the idea behind Aboriginal persons and how they view the people in their lives, how they respect everyone and everyone has something to teach. Reflecting on that compared to how we operate in today's world, most adults feel like they know everything, or that anything that they're going to need to learn is going to come from another educated adult. They don't take the time to learn from the young and to learn from the old and the other people just around them. It has to come from a dedicated source, And I really think if we were to, much like is said in a lot of that material, take the time to slow down and listen to the young that are trying to teach and the old that are trying to teach, and they generally aren't going to say, hey, sit down, Sonny, I need to teach you something, right? It's going to be, well, I'm going to go do this. And then you kind of need to offer up and say, hey, can I give you a hand? And go and learn the skill that they are subliminally, basically, trying to guide you through and teach, and pick up on the fact that they're trying to teach you something without telling you they're trying to teach it to you, what I find.
Yeah, well said, Heidi. Well said, I too am moved by that. I am too moved by that everybody has wisdom that can be shared. And how shallow are you that you just sort of rely on one sort of source of wisdom?
But I mean, if you look at today's society and the general adult, and I'm not saying every single person in this class is considered the general adult. I'm not putting this on anybody. I'm putting it on everybody as a whole, as an adult in today's society. For the most part, when we're going to learn something and seek out new information, we want to find it from a dedicated source, somebody who knows their stuff, somebody who we know is going to teach something to us in the way it needs to be done and thoroughly, right? Not, oh, well, this is the way grandma does it, right? Which is sad, because obviously grandma learned it from somewhere and it's working for her. So why don't we trust that, guys? We're trusting some random stranger who says they know their stuff over the people in our lives who we've known for years and years and years, and trust with everything else. So why not trust them with teaching us how to do this, right?
Yeah. And sorry about that.
No, I that was it. I'm good.
Okay. Oh, you got a big response there from Amber. Heidi, you're so right. Thank you so much for being open and understanding. No, you're right. I do a lot of workshops, and I've done lots of workshops for families through family resource programs, through family dynamics, through all kinds of other places. And when they come up to me afterwards and they go, hey, I need your advice on something, I go, no, I ain't going to give you any advice. Go talk to your mother. Go talk to your grandmother. Go talk to your grandfather. They've got the wisdom there. We have to be, what I appreciate about hanging out with Indigenous folks is they leave gaps. They leave gaps in the wisdom. This is what I've noticed. They leave gaps in the wisdom, but they leave me with enough sort of questions for me to fill those gaps, which the world I come from, we're not comfortable with that. We're not comfortable with gaps and stuff. We feel we got to fill them instead of being okay with, well, you don't know it right now. It's going to come, but you don't know it right now. So absolutely, Heidi. And if I can also just touch on one other thing that you had said there about learning from each other, from old to young. That's why I love learning stories. You know, I'm going to connect this to learning stories, but that's why I love learning stories, because what are we doing in a learning story? We are showing the world the wisdom of a child. A lot of people don't understand it. I am a much better human being. I am a smarter human being. I am a human being because I've taken the time to listen to kids. I've taken the time to try to think about, well, kids react to things like that. How come I don't react to things like that? How come I don't see the world like they see the world? So that's why I love learning stories so much, because it does get at that Indigenous worldview that there's wisdom there. Now, the way that communication works is it sort of relies on adults to broadcast that. So I just felt the need to connect your point about learning from our kids and sharing it with the world, you know, and again, there's parents, God bless them, but there's parents out there that don't even understand the wisdom of their own children, right? So that's why the learning story is important for me. Thank you for bringing that up, Heidi. That's beautiful.
Absolutely. I also have a question totally unrelated to any of the materials we've been covering.
No problem.
I was just looking at the calendar, trying to figure out when classes are, I should say, closer to Christmas and New Year's time, because I need to book holidays and I need to book time at my cabin, because apparently we need to schedule time in at a cabin. I was wondering if you can find out when our classes are supposed to be, because looking at this calendar, it says that our partnership and ECE class didn't start till the 6th, but I'm pretty sure it started on the 5th. And then looking at it, I keep clicking forwards and I'm already at Christmas, and partnerships in ECE is still going on December 24th and 25th. What? And on the 31st and on the 1st. So I'm a little confused.
No, yeah, we're not going that long. Holy smokes. Where's my date for it? Yeah, we're done on the 26th. Okay, so what you need from me then, Heidi, is to find out when is your last day of class for this term. Oh.
Yeah, like when is our last day before Christmas, and when is our first class after New Year's?
In the first class back. I'm going to do that right now so I don't forget. It looks like Elizabeth has chimed in and she said our last class before Christmas is December 18th, which is, yeah, that matches up to my last class for my other group here. Okay.
And just as a side point here, on the calendar on Hub, it says I'm into April 23rd now, and I'm still clicking, and it still says we have partnerships in ECE. Just as a side note.
Holy smokes, I'm putting in some time. All right, thanks for that, Heidi. I'm just typing this up now, folks. You'll see my perfect typing skills. I had a question from, okay. So, can you post the calendar practicum learns Joe? Okay, January 7th. Okay, so what I'll do, I'll just confirm whether or not, regarding dates. December 18th, last class for Thursday and Friday. I'm sorry, I talk when I type. I hope you guys are okay. You're getting a real behind the scenes on the madness of me. Group and is
Heidi.
Yeah, I'm here.
Is it orange on your hub?
Yeah.
I think it has to do with the WebEx. Like I think if Mark has it like continuously every Thursday and Friday, like a reoccurring WebEx, I think that's what it is.
Okay. That would make sense.
Was that Nicole Sumka?
Yes.
You are right for the win. Good for you. Okay, I'll just get confirmation. Sounds like you guys have it. But
Lizzie, where do I find this calendar?
So if you go to the Practicum Learn tab, like the September 2019, so then if you click on our September 2019, there's a calendar in there. I don't remember what it's called, but I have it all printed.
Okay.
That would be awesome.
I will cancel out all those WebEx after our guest speaker. Okay, sorry about that. Oh, God. I usually put an end date, but sometimes I think I just click continuing. Okay. Confirmation, Heidi, yes, December, and Elizabeth has also said that too. Yeah, 18th is your last day, and January 7th is your first day back.
Okie dokie, perfect. Thank you so much.
Oh, thank you for that. Thank you, Nicole, for pointing that out. Oh, golly. You know what I love about you guys? You don't know me very well. You know, we know each other a little bit, but not very well. But you're very cool when I screw up. So that says a lot about you guys. You guys are fantastic. I don't know what you're writing to each other. I just have this Pollyanna view that, oh, they're so nice. They're just so gentle with me. Maybe it's my beard. Maybe they feel sorry for the old man. Okay, so I think we've got that cleared up. Thank you, Heidi, for bringing that up. Thank you, Nicole, for pointing out the WebEx. Oh, God, you know what? Now I think about it, I think I've done that for another class, too. So, okay. All right.
I also, if we have a minute, I also have one more question.
Of course.
I received the funky card thing in the mail that says I'm supposed to carry that all the time while I'm on practicum something or other. Okay. I can get it and read it exactly to you.
Yeah.
And I wanted to know if I am actually supposed to carry this on me at all times while I'm in my own workplace doing my practicum.
Yeah, that's...
Because in my backpacks all at work, I have all my emergency contact information more so than what's on this card, so...
Okay, I'm just going to take Tanya right now, okay?
Okay.
Heidi, I think that's more for like if we were going out to different centers. I think it's more for COVID so that they can, if there was a breakout at that center, they'd be able to contact us.
Yeah.
That's what my understanding of it was.
But I mean, it says workplace students, and then it says when you are on practicum, like those, and then we've already been told that we're all doing practicum in our own workplaces, right? So I just thought it was kind of interesting, like. I don't know.
Okay. I throw that out on the teams for Tanya. Usually, who was that responded? Was that Nicole again?
No, that was me. Kate.
Okay. Pardon me? Oh, Kate. Okay, thank you, Kate. Yeah, you might be onto something there too, Kate, because for way I took that, but I'm just getting confirmation. But the way I took that was, yeah, if we're doing offsite or ever, that's a possibility. If something happens, then they have that. Yes. Okay. I just got a message here from Tanya. Yes, the message is for them. You got to carry the card with you, even at your own workplace. There you go. Okay. Thanks for this. Thanks, Kate, for your responses there. All right. Okay. Any other questions that I can't answer?
No, I'm pretty sure those are all my unanswered questions at this point.
Okay. Okay. Just give me a second here. I'm just saying Heidi is putting me through the ringer. Okay.
That's what I'm here for. I'm just here to make mornings difficult, right?
No, not at all. Not at all. You know, Heidi, I'm the kind of person that I try to do my best, but there's going to be gaps and stuff, and I really rely on others to fill those gaps for me. So you are definitely one of them. And I bet you your classmates here are very appreciative of someone like you who just throws it out there, gets clarification. So that's cool. That's
Oh, absolutely. I got no shame. I will ask what I need to ask.
No, I always need a student like that, and I always appreciate a student like that. I had a student who graduated, but she was like she was the first one to always answer a question, and then everybody else would. And she started to feel bad about it, going, I'm always the first. And then people in the class said, no, we need you to be the first. And then one day she was sick. Oh, boy, did we miss her. Oh, boy. All right. Any other questions or sort of comments on stuff? All right. Once you guys get yourself ready, grab yourself a cup of coffee if you haven't got it already. Oh, Joffrey's here. Good to see you, Joffrey. Grab yourself a cup of coffee. Get yourself all ready. And Joanna will be with us very, very shortly. All right. So I'm going to turn off my camera for a second. I'm going to turn off my mic. And then once our Joanna comes in, we get going. And as I said, I forget where I said it. Oh, on the blog. As I said on the blog that it's going to be a good day. We're going to be very full today. So I hope that you guys can find a little bit of time for yourself after today, like after our session. All right. Don't forget, we've got 2 work days to finish assignments, so don't worry about that. So I'm just throwing that out to you guys. Don't beat yourselves up if you think you need to have a little bit of time for yourself after this. Take heed to what Diana had said yesterday. Again, what would love do? Well, sometimes love says, yeah, I need some time for myself. All right, so let's take a couple minutes. Go grab your coffee. I'm going to turn my camera off, leave everything on, and then you'll hear my beautiful voice telling you that we are back on. All right. Take care, everybody. See you in a few minutes.
Good morning.
Good morning, Joanna. I just finished doing a little chitty chat thing, so they're just grabbing a cup of coffee real quick and all that. Now, Joanna, I forgot to ask you, are you cool with this if I record, or would you rather me not record?
No, you can record it.
Okay. You look fantastic. Look at the lighting.
Thanks. I had to get like one of those desktop photography lights.
Brown ones?
It's rectangular, but it's tiny. It's just teeny tiny.
Where did you get yours?
Amazon. You can get everything on Amazon. I've developed a really amazing Amazon shopping habit since COVID. I buy everything from Amazon. I had to get a different mic too because the one on my webcam isn't that great.
Okay.
So I have like a studio recording mic that's kind of cool, even complete with the condenser.
Good for you. Well, you sound great. Are you like? Is it one of those Zoom podcast mics?
Yeah, I think that's one of the things. You can use it for recording music and then podcasts especially.
Is it Zoom though? Is it the company Zoom?
No.
What's the name of it?
I will have to look it up. I don't know. I'll send you a link of the stuff that I ordered.
Okay. Because I've been looking at those Zoom podcast mics and they look pretty good too. And the same thing comes with a condenser. So.
Yeah. Who was here? Oh, I had Kelly here last week, and Kelly from the Learning Center, and she's like, "Oh my God, look at your setup." I'm like, I spend a lot of time online, so might as well invest.
Well, you look great. You sound great. It's perfect. Cheers, mate.
Cheers. What type of tea are you drinking?
Irish stout. You know me.
I just brewed a cup of Earl Grey lavender.
I don't even know what you're talking about.
Tea. Talking about tea.
Isn't lavender a color?
And it's also like an herb.
Now, I'm a coffee guy. I go to Black Pearl. I'm addicted to their Ethiopian blend.
Oh, Ethiopian blend I hear is quite good. It's one I always get for my dad for Christmas.
From Black Pearl?
No, I've usually done from 10,000 Villages because all of my coffee-loving friends really like that. But since they've closed, I'm looking for a new Ethiopian blend.
Okay. Yeah, mine, the one I get is called a Kaffa or something like that. It's really good. And I like Black Pearl. I hate the owner. I hate having to buy stuff there, but it's good coffee. Like, what are you going to do?
Right.
All right, I think we're ready. Okay, right on. Okay, I just wanted to make sure that everybody's back, if that's okay with you, Joanna.
Yeah.
Okay, Amber, we're back on. Get back here, Amber. Amara, we're back on. Get back here. Brielle, come on, we're ready. Come on, where are you? Kate, come on, you've been talking this morning. We know you're there. Chari, get back here. Joffrey. You know what, Joanna? That's really his name, Joffrey.
Joffrey, like it's spelled Jeffrey, but pronounced Joffrey?
With the G? Yeah.
Amazing. I love it.
This guy should be royalty. Joffrey Douglas Hawkes.
Yes, sure. Sir Joffrey Douglas Hawkes.
I would buy his book.
Me too.
Haley McGilvery. I hope you're here. Katie Werbowski. I hope you're here. Kayla Ducharme, the award-winning Kayla Ducharme. I hope you're here. Leah Duquette. She's a wrestler.
What? Leah, you're a wrestler? Oh my gosh. You're totally badass.
And once we're done all this, Joanna, because it would be inappropriate, but once she graduates, I'm going to fight her.
Yeah, you are.
Yeah, I am. I've been working out. Elizabeth is here. Margaret is here. Megan is here. And our other Megan with the H is here. Nicole Supka, I hope you're here. Heidi Peterson is in the house. Boy, Heidi brought up a really nice thing in our conversation about some of your resources, so I hope she shares that with you. It was really, really cool. Samantha Jolie is here. And who could forget Tatiana Mohammed is here. I have the pleasure of welcoming one of the smartest people, one of the coolest people, one of the funniest people that I like to sort of hang out with this is Joanna White. And also she just lived down the road from me when I used to live out in Ontario.
We have the Ontario connection.
We do.
We're awesome.
We are pretty awesome. It also explains why we are the way we are.
This is true.
Well, Joanna, I've had you here before. I always learn something new. I always learn something new about big picture. I always learn something new about myself. And today today I'm just feeling that this is just absolutely perfect timing to have you come into our class. So I appreciate you being here, Joanna, and I can't wait to hear how this goes. Now, Joanna, just for housekeeping, should I turn off my video and mic or just my mic? What would you prefer?
It doesn't matter. At least your mic.
Okay. Because sometimes it's nice to see a face, eh? Like when you're talking.
Yeah. Although I find I start staring at the face, which means it looks like I'm looking into somewhere else. Whatever.
Okay. You know me, I don't care.
Yeah, you can hear my voice. You can see my PowerPoint. Who cares where my eyes are staring?
All right, Joanna, I'll click off my mic and take it away, my friend.
Great. Thanks, Mark. Thanks for inviting me to come to your class. I'm always really excited to come spend time with other classes aside from the couple that I'm teaching right now. Okay, so Mark has asked me to come and talk a little bit about family and parenting values and just essentially the Indigenous worldview around these two elements. I appreciate all of you who sent in your reflections from the online learning circle. I read those this morning, and there's some good stuff in there. And I acknowledge that the content I asked you to review was really difficult and really emotional, and it seems like the stuff that I was reading, you were really impacted by it. So thank you for taking the time to view the resources, because it was really important that you had a really solid foundation coming into our time together this morning. So it occurred to me when one of the other instructors pointed out to me that I never really introduced myself to student groups. And I believe, Mark, this is the first time that I've had this group. I don't think I've met with this group before.
Yeah, I'm not sure, guys. This is technically not my home group, but Joffrey
says I have. Oh, okay. Okay, but I think what one of the instructors from your previous, Melinda, okay, and I was talking to Michelle as well, just in terms of I never introduced myself. I just kind of jump into my content because I'm really excited about the content. So this morning, because it's Friday morning and why not, I'll give you a little background on who I am. To make, so you guys know that I actually have some credibility here to what I'm going to share. So like Mark says, I hail from Ontario, right down the road from him. I grew up in two parts of Ontario, southwestern Ontario, right by the Michigan border, and then sort of central Ontario, just east of Toronto. But more than that, I've got 27 years of experience in the social services field. So I have done it all. I have worked in ECE, and I have to tell you, ECE was not my favorite, only because all of the littles that I worked with, you know what, bodily functions gross me out. Like the snot and like everything, super gross when I was working in daycare. I enjoyed it, but I knew that it wasn't my jam. And so I went off and did some other work and landed in child and youth care work. So the majority of my work has been done with children and youth, but really from the high risk, at risk perspective, and working with children and youth and their families who have lots of system involvement. And the majority of my work has been done with Indigenous folks, both in Canada and the United States. So I've spent some time working in the US as well. A big part of the work that I've done is bringing that holistic perspective. So I do choose to follow a traditional Anishinaabe lifestyle. So embracing those pre-contact values and belief systems and teachings that I've learned throughout my life. And I didn't always live like that. I did grow up in a non-Indigenous family. I was part of the 60s scoop. I have nothing but love for my family because I had a lot of really amazing opportunities. But I still didn't escape some of the stuff that you were learning about in your online circle content. And so that really drove me to really do some good work with Indigenous people from a helping perspective. So the majority of my work has been done in addictions, mental health, and trauma treatment for children, youth, and families, specifically for folks who are involved in multiple different systems. And the other kind of work that I've done is working in our provincial and federal correctional institutions, which I love. Freaks my family out that I love spending time in jail and in prison, and my work has brought me through Canada, but also through the United States. And before COVID, I was doing some work with the state of Minnesota, their Department of Corrections, in one of their maximum security facilities and then their supermax security facility, and working with Indigenous offenders and bringing in that holistic perspective and really helping them to address those root causes. I don't know if it's in this presentation, but the idea of root causes is really sort of key for Indigenous people, and we're really talking about that overarching umbrella of colonization. So a big part of my job now is really working with people to smash the colonial patriarchy and help them to embrace their best selves. So one of the ways that I do that is I work at Red River. This is actually a unique position. This is the only position of its kind throughout Red River College. And I work specifically in the Community Services Department. And this is what I do most of the time, is I'm going into classes like yours and I'm sharing that Indigenous perspective from the lens of the industry that you work through. And I can do that because I've worked in most of the industries that the programs we offer in community services. And I love doing it. And so I hope, which class, okay, so we did challenging behaviors in Melinda's class. So we're going to build a little bit on that today, and we're going to look more globally at family and parenting values. So that's a little bit about me. So I actually have some cred. I know what I'm talking about. And I'm super passionate about offering this holistic perspective and through the lens of an Indigenous worldview. So let's get going. You are going to expected to participate throughout this presentation, so don't be shy. Okay, I always like to open our time together with a thought to ponder, and this comes from Chief Sitting Bull. And he says, let us put our hearts and spirits together and see the best life we can create for our children and future generations. And I really like that because it captures the essence of what we're going to be talking about today. If at any point you have a question or a comment, please feel free to put it up in chat, or if you're feeling super brave this Friday morning, you can unmute your mic. Okay, so this is where you get to participate with me. So my question to you is, why is it important to have specific knowledge around how to work with Indigenous children, youth, and their families? So you can either unmute your mic or put your answer in chat. So think about that for a minute and then share your answer. And Mark, at any point, if you want to jump in, please feel free to do so.
Can I just jump in now?
Of course you can.
I used to live up in the north coast of ECE, it was an indigenous community. It was non and indigenous, but overwhelmingly an indigenous community. So my son went to school and learned about indigenous values and understandings because that was the community we lived in. Your question here makes me think about Manitoba, and maybe I'm a cynic, but I just think that we live in an indigenous province, and so it is important to understand who are, like, the only way we can understand each other as Manitobans is to understand where we come from. So your question for me is it's important because we are an indigenous province. We have indigenous values that we need to remember.
I like that. That's such an honoring answer for Indigenous people. And I think just adding on to that is that the majority of Canada's Indigenous people live within the province of Manitoba. So it's particularly crucial that you're learning the true history of Canada's relationship with Indigenous people and the impacts of that. But more than that, you're learning about the culture, you're learning about an Indigenous worldview, because it's important, because you're inevitably going to be working with Indigenous children and youth and their families and caregivers. I see we have an answer. We have a couple.
Can I just add something, Joanna? Or did I cut somebody off?
No, I'm here for adding stuff. We'll get
okay. That exactly what you said. And I don't know about folks out there, but when I walk the land here in Manitoba, you know, whether it's out by the Whiteshell, whether it's here in my own community, my mind goes to who has walked here before, and I think about how do I create that sort of universality of who had walked here before to who is walking here right now, how you have to keep that sort of stream going. So I know I'm kind of an odd duck that way, but I think about those kinds of things. Sorry for cutting you off there, Amara.
No, I think that is an important perspective, because the other thing that's really big sort of within Canada is just this idea of reconciliation. And of course, here in Canada, we have the Truth and Reconciliation Commission, which is housed here in Manitoba. A really notable Manitoban headed that commission, Justice Murray Sinclair, and you watched one of his videos in your online circle. Just this idea of reconciliation and the fact that every single person living in Canada has a responsibility to first learn the true history of Canada's relationship with Indigenous people. And then more than that is be an active participant in this idea of reconciliation. And so one of the things that you can do is do that through your profession. So ECE, there's lots of opportunities to engage in reconciliation, because one of the things that we have to acknowledge is that we are never going to be able to change the systems, because systemic change takes a really long time. And I don't think it's going to happen in any of our lifetimes. But what we can do is work with individuals and sort of create that ripple effect. So perhaps some of the stuff that we talked about today, you go back to your families or you go to your centers and you start having conversations, and we just keep making those ripples. And eventually we're going to impact individual change, which is far more powerful than systemic change, because eventually, if enough individuals engage in that change process and have those paradigm shifts in thinking, then we can start to see some of that system change. But it's going to take a while. It's going to take a long time. So I'm going to just switch over to chat here. So Amara shares, I think it's important because of the demographic I work with in my center. I work at the Lord Selkirk Park Child Care Center, and a lot of the people in this community are Indigenous, right? Like right in the core there. Knowing about their culture, customs, and beliefs are truly important when interacting with them every day. Definitely, because it's really about honoring the people that you work with and for. So that's a great perspective. Thanks for that, Amara. And Megan shares, I think it's important so that we can connect to the Indigenous people we work with or the children we have in our centers in a way that is respecting their cultural customs, beliefs, and values. I love those answers, and really this underlying theme with both of those is just this idea of honoring that way of being and doing and learning and thinking. So that's really important. Is there anybody else who would like to share? I know this seems to be a pretty big class. I know there's more than 2 people who are online right now, plus Mark who shared. Don't be shy. It's Friday morning.
Hello, it's Amber.
Hey,
I believe
Amber.
it's important. We wouldn't treat any other culture without learning about it and being respectful of it, and then learning what we can and taking from that culture to use in our teaching. But I think we overlook Indigenous culture because it just seems so, it's here, whatever. We need to learn about it because it needs to be respected. It is a part of who we are. It is a part of where we are. And it is something that has core values that are exceptional for children.
Mm-hmm. Oh, I like that. Exceptional for children. Yes, some of those core values and beliefs are really powerful. And they don't just have to be for Indigenous people, because a lot of those are really what Mark was saying, like just about universal. There's that universality with some of these core values and beliefs because they're good. They're just a good way to lay out your life and have that foundation. Thanks for that, Amber. Anybody else like to share? Are you feeling brave enough to unmute your mic? Are you all still sleeping? It sounds like you were having a pretty good discussion with Mark before I jumped on the line. And it's not like we're strangers. We've had one circle together.
Universe. Oh, sorry.
Sorry, Joffrey. Go ahead. Go ahead, Joffrey.
You get the idea when the Indigenous or other other people from different countries, you get to know them, like their culture, because you were studying, and you can apply it when the kids are there.
Mm-hmm. Yes, thanks, Joffrey. Great perspective. Heidi, I think that's you who is speaking.
Yeah. I mean, personally, I think it's important to have specific knowledge around how to work with anybody. Mm-hmm. I mean, going further than just Indigenous children and youth and their families, and having that specific knowledge about how does this family operate, regardless of where they're from or what they do or what their beliefs are in any of that. Looking at how does this family need my help and the knowledge, and how can I work with this family in specifically, whether that be Indigenous or Asian or Filipino or Black or white or purple or yellow or pink for that matter, right? It really going away from just focusing on, okay, you're Indigenous, what do I need to do to focus on your Indigenous side of this, and how can I help this specifically? How can we help you as a person grow into what you want to be? Do you want this help in the side of Indigenous things? Do you want to learn about the German culture, right? Like, it really, it really all, in my opinion, depends on the person, the child, and their family, right? It may not necessarily be specifically about learning about the Indigenous side of this Indigenous child. If they want to learn about something German or learn about something Russian or Canadian, if you can call that a thing, I learn about what they want to learn about and help them grow in that fashion versus specifically making sure that everybody has their roots, where they came from ingrained in them as well. If that makes sense?
Yeah, no, that makes total sense. So just this idea of inclusivity, right, for everybody.
Yeah.
Is that what you were saying? It didn't sound very sure there.
I guess so. It's trying to focus less on what everybody is, where everybody is coming from, and focus more on where everybody wants to go.
But wouldn't you agree, though, or maybe you disagree with this, is that you need to know where you come from in order to know where you're going. So this idea of being really rooted in those core values and beliefs, that cultural and ancestral wisdom, it doesn't matter from what culture, whatever culture it happens to be from. So do you think that it's important for people to know where they come from in order to have a foundation so that they can go and explore where they need to be or where they would like to go?
Absolutely. I mean, it's not saying that we can't talk about what's happened in the past. Obviously, talking about what's happened in the past is going to help eliminate possible errors and fatalities and mistakes and crucial things that have happened in the past to have been happening possibly in the future. Because if we don't talk about what's happened in the past, how are we going to know that we shouldn't be repeating these things, right? Talking about stuff like that is very important. Talking about the information regarding any of that type of stuff is important, but I also think it's important to not necessarily, I want to use the word push too hard when it comes to teaching things like that to kids and letting them explore different areas of expertise, if you want to call it such.
Yeah, I understand what you're saying. I'm just playing a little bit of devil's advocate in terms of just pushing you a little bit.
No, absolutely. Absolutely.
Your response. I absolutely think it's important to have that diversity and inclusion for everybody. But one of the things that we need to recognize, and I'm glad this conversation is going this way, Heidi, because you just reminded me of a really important point of this idea that, yes, there was this historical trauma, this idea of collective trauma, and then, of course, we have that multi-generational and intergenerational trauma. But one of the things that makes things unique for Indigenous people, especially within Canada, is this idea of contemporary trauma. So the fact that these things are still happening even today. So we don't necessarily have residential schools as they were, but we do have residential schools in a sense through some of our other systems. We look at the child welfare system. Did you know that the rates of children being apprehended from Indigenous families is actually now higher than the number of kids that were taken for residential schools in total over all of those years? And our institutions, in terms of correctional institutions, again, those numbers are significantly higher. So our jails and our prisons have become residential schools for Indigenous people because we're looking at that over-representation of system involvement. And when we look at things like missing and murdered Indigenous women and girls, there's that as well. So there's a lot of stuff that's still continuing to happen. On top of, Indigenous people are the only nation within this country that are still governed by the government of Canada. We have what's called the Indian Act, and that is still very much alive and well, and there's lots of controversy about that. And today's not the class to get into that, but there's still lots of stuff. So there's still these contemporary things that are happening, because one of the things I heard you say was making sure that we don't repeat history, except it's still happening. Kids are still being taken from their homes and being placed in other homes, or they're being placed in institutions. So there is still a piece of that. That's what makes Indigenous people and the culture in Canada very much unique from some of our newcomer populations and for even the people who settled here, so from like settler colonies and stuff. I'm not disagreeing with what you're saying. There is a lot of stuff that I agree with what you're saying in terms of diversity and inclusion, and it's important. The thing that I want to hammer home today is that Indigenous people are a very unique population within Canada because of some of these factors. Does that make sense?
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. I mean, I could sit here and I don't want to say go back and forth, but basically, like you were saying, play devil's advocate, vice versa. I'm real good at playing devil's advocate. And just trying to find different points, not necessarily because they're my true, like, deep, rude-hearted beliefs, but just to keep the conversation going and whatnot, right? But I mean, I don't want to keep us on the singular question all morning, so if I you know.
I appreciate it. Yeah, I enjoy banter because this is important stuff, and I hope that within these virtual circles that we're creating is that people feel safe enough to talk about some of these things that are coming up that may be controversial or maybe people have strong opinions about it, because this is a safe space where you can have those conversations, and better to have them here where you can be supported and there's lots of different perspectives, as opposed to going out, you know, sort of into the real world and having some kind of conversation and not going well and either really offending someone or somebody offends you. This is just a nice place to be able to shake some of that stuff out. So thank you, Heidi.
Can I just bring up something that you had mentioned, Joanna? It's also about newcomers. The reason why I do work with newcomers is because I used to teach in an Indigenous ECE program on Selkirk Avenue, and we got a call from ERCOM because what they found out is that every newcomer into the city, the first thing they learn is stay away from Indigenous people.
Mm-hmm.
The very first thing they learn. And so they sort of reached out to us so we could bring both groups together. Mm-hmm. So what you had said there about sort of the newcomers is absolutely true. And Indigenous people do have a very unique position, experience within this country. So I just wanted to throw that out there because that shocked me. That shocked me. That's the first thing you learn when you come here from another country, for Christ's sakes. Oh, I swore. Sorry about that. There's a kid listening.
And that's true because some of the international students I've had in class when I've taught an Indigenous context class, it's one of the main classes that I teach for a couple of different programs. The fact that we were able to create space within our circle, and we were obviously able to meet in person because this was pre-COVID. We were talking about some of those messages that they were given by the folks with whatever immigration organization they happen to be working with, so other professionals, you know, sort of in the field, and all of these really negative views of Indigenous people were being shared. But we created space so people could talk about that. And I always think it's super funny, like when we had a really large contingency of students from the Punjab, and sort of halfway through our course, one of the students, I guess, was feeling brave, maybe a bit sassy that day. And she said to me in circle, she says, you know what, like, you're not so bad as an Indigenous person, Joanna. And I'm like, thanks, I guess. You know, all about smashing stereotypes in terms of, you know, whatever is out there about Indigenous people. But it's important that we have these discussions because when you think about it, where else can you have these? Like, where else can you unpack your biases or some of the messaging you've received around Indigenous people? Even myself as an Indigenous person, I've heard lots of things, right? And in terms of one of the courses I had to take at the post-secondary level, and we were actually mostly a class of Indigenous people with a handful of non-Indigenous people, some of the things that we had to explore and unpack were super uncomfortable because they were looking at those biases and stereotypes specifically about our nation of people, and those were really hard. And we were talking a lot about our experiences in terms of some of that racism and discrimination that we've received. But it's not focusing on that and recognizing that everybody who's here in Canada has an important part. So one of the things that we'll be talking about this morning is this idea about the collective. And so the Indigenous worldview is really about collectivism. So it's about the we as opposed to the me. There's room and space for autonomy, but it really is about bringing it back to the collective. So everybody who's here in Canada right now has a really important part and significant part in this overall collective. Part of that is learning this history. Part of that is working towards reconciliation. But everyone is sacred and is special and has a really unique gift or destiny or life purpose, whatever language it is that you associate with that. So everyone here has an important role, and we need everybody. And I think that's one of the really nice perspectives about the Indigenous worldview is how inclusive it is. And when we start looking at the medicine wheel today, you'll see that the 4 nations of humankind are represented on there. And there's a reason for that, because together we're stronger, and together we meet in the circle, meet in the middle, and we work together to create the life and the future that we want for ourselves and for these future generations. So very inclusive of everybody. And if I can just share a really brief story. So at my work at Stony Mountain Institution, one of the things that I do is I go in and I conduct sweat lodges for the different inmate populations. And the one time we had the 4 nations represented in the lodge. So when we look at the medicine wheel, there was people from all of those 4 nations. And it was the coolest sweat that I'd ever been in. The energy was completely different. It was really cool. You could feel that. It was a different type of connection, a different type of energy in there, and every single person sitting in that sweat felt that. So this idea of the overall collective, we're all supposed to work together to create a really good life for ourselves, for our children, and of course, future generations. I see there's, I like the side dialogue here about swearing. Amazing. And glad to have your daughter join us. Amber, what's her name? Hi, Hazel. Welcome. Glad to have you with us this morning. Okay, does anyone else want to share their answer to this question?
Can I just bring up one more thing, Joanna?
Of course, Mark.
I was moved by all the resources, but Justice Sinclair's short little video on reconciliation sort of answers this for me too. That the fact that 7 generations of people have been affected by this thing, and that it's going to take more generations of people to come out of this. That is why it is so darn important to have specific knowledge about Indigenous children, youth, and families, from my perspective.
Definitely, yeah. Murray is one of my professional crushes, and actually before COVID, he and I were supposed to share a stage together and do some work with, I believe they were 3rd-year law students at the U of M, but also practicing lawyers and crown attorneys. And so our whole jam was going to be around reconciliation, and specifically we were going to be looking at the Aboriginal Justice Inquiry, which he was one of the main lawyers and authors for that. That came out in the early 90s. And so it was super exciting. We were going to get to guest lecture together, but then COVID happened. And as everyone knows, COVID just throws a monkey wrench in everything. Yeah, so he has really good stuff. If you're interested in learning more about reconciliation, I recommend him, Justice Murray Sinclair. He's got lots of really cool YouTube videos. We use him quite a bit in my context course. He just has a really good vibe, and he just talks in a really kind and gentle way, which I think is really important when you're exploring some super uncomfortable realities. And reconciliation is really about reconciling the truth for yourself and how that impacts you. So the stuff that you were learning and watching and reading in your learning circle, reconciliation first starts with you reconciling that truth for yourself and all of the feels that it likely brought up. And I know it brought up lots, because those of you who sent me those assignments, the emotions came through really clear in what you were writing. And so that's a big part of it. It's not reconciliation if it's comfortable. So this whole idea, reconciliation, is about becoming comfortable with the uncomfortable, if that makes sense. Okay, anybody else like to share your answer to this question? Everybody's like, nah, we good. We good. Okay, so we'll keep going. So at any point, if you have questions or comments or you want to debate, just let me know. I'm always up for answering questions or clarifying, or if you want to debate with me, I love a good debate. Mark and I and, oh my gosh, Janelle, we spent some time debating. Okay, so let's just get into this. So right here in front of you, this graphic is a medicine wheel. And so we're looking at the medicine wheel holistically. So just this idea of looking at it as a whole. So it is a worldview of oneness, interconnectedness, interdependence, and cycles and patterns. And I like this graphic because it demonstrates that cycle, but it also demonstrates those interconnections. So your values influence your decisions lead to actions, your actions influence your emotions. This is a big one, the emotions. And then your emotions influence your values. And you can see that it just goes around and round. And it doesn't matter where you jump in on this cycle, it is still cyclical. You'll still work through. Does that make sense? You can just give me a yes in the chat. I don't think in WebEx we have reactions. Like in Zoom, you can do a thumbs up. I don't think we have this here. Okay, so I see 2 yeses, 3, 4, 5. I'm going for 10. 6 from Mark. I need like 4 more and then we can go on. 7, 8, 2 more. Like, are the rest of you doing laundry or are you binge watching a good show on Netflix? Okay, there we go. We got 10. Okay, good. Good. Like, I would be so envious if you're actually binge watching a show on Netflix right now.
Can I just add something, Joanna, about the medicine wheel?
Yeah.
I was blown away by a daycare, a Head Start program that I was visiting way up in, I call it New Liskeard. It's the northeast corner of Ontario, and they use the medicine wheel for their curriculum with the kids, so that all the activities. They actually use a medicine wheel as their framework, as how they write out the activities. Blew my mind. I'm learning. I've been spending a lot of time. Got some, Anne Rundle. I don't know if you know her. She's been trying to get me, to understand the medicine wheel, and it's complicated and it's simple. So I'm trying to get my head around it. Seeing the curriculum used this way made way more sense for me. So. Thank you.
Yeah. That's a great point because really we need to be looking at everything that we're doing. So whether, you as students at Red River or you going into ECE, being in your centers is just this idea of holism, right? So it's the idea of this holistic perspective. So the children that you're working with are not just their behaviors or their issue or whatever it happens to be. They're these really cool, simple yet complex beings, but they have 4 really beautiful parts to them: the physical, the mental, the spiritual, and the emotional. And you really have to look at those 4 aspects in order to really understand a person. But if we're talking about, curriculum within a daycare center, it really should be holistic. And that's often one of my challenges to students, especially in ECE or any of the programs we have in community services, is just this idea that you have to really challenge yourself to create an environment where you're looking at those 4 aspects. So physical, mental, spiritual, and emotional. And we'll talk a little bit more about that as we go along this morning. Thanks for that, Mark. That's a good share. Okay, so the medicine wheel emphasizes the importance of maintaining balance within the 4 aspects of self. So physical, emotional, mental, spiritual. And you can see the medicine wheel here: body, mind, spirit, and emotions. So we want that balance with others and with the community in order to have harmony within the collective, within each individual. So when you think of yourselves as ECEs, what is your collective? It's a question. Feel free to answer. You can answer in chat or you can unmute your mic. So as ECEs, what is your collective? Anybody?
Well, I want to go with our collective would be the other people around us type of thing, the supports that we have for us in terms of as a person, not just as ECE.
So that's one collective. So if we're looking specifically as you as an ECE, what is your collective? I think of that 90s song, Mark, you know, like things that make you go, I know, I'm making you brain. It's Friday morning. I get it.
Can I may be way off. This is a complicated question. This is a complicated question, but when I think about this question for myself, and in my work as a collective, I always see that I'm working with you as an individual. I'm working with you as within the community, but I'm also working with you as all the ancestors that brought you up to this place where we are today. And I've been getting sort of better at or getting my head around that whole notion is when I work with somebody, I'm working with all the people that brought them here. So am I on the right track there, or am I way off?
No, you're on the right track. So I'm challenging you to think of what does your collective look like on any given day that you are in the role of ECE. So Mark mentioned sort of an example of a collective for you as an individual. But if we were to pause and think about what your collective is when you're in your centers, what is that collective? So this idea of collective is just community or family. There's lots of different words for collective. So when you think of yourself as an ECE and you're in your center, who makes up your collective? What is your collective?
It would be like your other coworkers.
Definitely.
The children that you're caring for, the families that you're involved with.
Definitely.
Okay.
Ding, 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 we have a winner. That's exactly what collective is. But if we think about the physical place that we're at, what else could we add to our collective? So the physical aspect of the medicine wheel talks about like our bodies for sure, but it also talks about the physical spaces and environments that we find ourselves in. So everything you said, Tatiana, but what else could be part of the collective?
It's the community that we're in, so different areas of the city or outside the city, like where our physical center is. So if we're located like by ourselves or within a school or another building.
Yeah, and just your center itself is part of your collective, right? Because it's where the collective or the community gathers and spends their time. Does that make sense? Does the collective piece make sense now?
Yes.
Okay, perfect. Thank you, Tatiana. Amber shares parents, other staff, the children, and all their histories, the space we teach in. Definitely. So there's lots of different components that make up the collective. So it's really people, places, and things, and locations, right? I hear from Tatiana like the community or neighborhood that you happen to be in as well. Okay, so the idea is on any given day for ourselves, first and foremost, we're about creating that balance in our 4 parts. But it's also bringing that into the centers that you're in and ensuring that you have elements that speak to each of these 4 parts. So physical, mental, spiritual, and emotional. We'll get into that a bit more in detail later on in this presentation. So this makes sense. If you can just put me or give me a yes in the chat or give me a thumbs up. Mark's got 2 thumbs up. Winning at life today. All right, there we go. Look, everyone's paying attention. Awesome. But if you are binge watching a show on either Netflix or Amazon Prime or Disney Plus, I want to know what it is because maybe I'll check it out after. I'm always looking for a new show. Okay, So why a circle? Because that was often a question that people would ask. And so it teaches that life is cyclical, and because everything occurs naturally in cycles. So if we're just to pause and think about some of these naturally occurring cycles, what can you think of? What are some of those naturally occurring cycles that we have in life? You can unmute your mic or put your answer up in chat. We're currently going through one right now with the weather. Go ahead, Heidi.
Well, you've got weather patterns, the seasons, you've got the life cycle, you've got the cycle of the plant life cycle.
Yeah.
There's lots of cycles that the world naturally itself goes through.
Yeah.
I mean, it's going through a major one if you consider the difference in the weather patterns as to when winter is starting and ending right now in comparison to what it was 30 years ago, in comparison to what it was 100 years ago. We're getting closer to that 100-year ago point yet again, where it's shifting just those couple of months and how severe the winters are and things like that, right?
Yeah, definitely. And there's lots of naturally occurring cycles for us and individuals every day too. So it would be an example of one of your naturally occurring cycles. You're doing one thing now. You're attending class, right? So that is a cycle. But what else is a cycle? Oh, Amber has a bunch of things here. The circle are connected just like we are connected. The water table, menstruation for women and young girls, life, learning, definitely learning is a cycle. One that hasn't come up is when grandfather's sun rises in the morning and then sets in the evening, but then at the same time we have Granny Moon rising and then she sets as well, sort of in the daytime. So that's a cycle as well. And anything within your daily life is considered a cycle. So maybe you get up, you meditate, maybe you work out, maybe you go for a walk. Your routine is a cycle because there's a start and then there's an end. It usually ends when we go to bed at night. So another note here is the potential for transformation is inherent in all creation. So at any point, we can transform a cycle for ourselves. And the essence of the wheel is about movement and change. So if you think of like a bicycle wheel or tire, or even a car, it moves, right? It's movement and change. So at any point, you can create that movement or you can create change within your cycle. And so that's why we use a circle to represent these points. Does that make sense? You can give me a yes in the chat or a thumbs up, or you can unmute your mic and let me know.
Can I just say something? If we can just reflect on how different we are today than we were a year ago, the things that we do today, how we were different a year ago, how I always like this quote from John Dewey: truth is a process. This is why I like this medicine wheel, because in a year from now, I'm going to be different. I'm going to think of different things. So I like, and this, if I could just say, it drives me crazy when people say they don't like change. How can you be, pardon me?
It's inherent. Change is inherent. Whether you like it or not, it's going to happen.
That's it. So
yeah, but that doesn't mean that I gotta like it.
Well, that's true. But if you put that resistant energy into whatever change happens to be, whether it's significant or even if it's just a minor one, it sort of roots you. Like it's sort of like you're moving through quicksand, when if you just accept it and if you even just like it a little bit, you can move through that a little bit easier than if you're resisting it.
But what if that change isn't necessarily for the better and yet somebody's trying to tell you that it's for the better? How about what if you have conflicting opinions with the person who's enforcing the change?
That's fair. And I think that's one of the unfortunate parts of life is sometimes we are going to be told to do things because it's part of whatever hierarchical bullshit structure that we happen to be in.
Exactly.
Except we always have 100% control over how we're going to choose to respond. So you have two options. You can react, which is fueled by feelings, and never a really good thing because we're often not thinking logically or clearly. Our thinking brain has actually literally been shut down by our feeling brain. Or you can respond, where you're able to engage in that logical sequencing of thinking, and then just decide that you're going to go with it. You may not agree with it, you may not like it, but you're not going to resist it, because more issues come from resisting change than if you were to just make peace with it. So still honoring yourself in terms of recognizing, I'm not happy with this change, I don't want to do it. However, I recognize that I must, and for whatever reason, whoever is dictating the change, then you just roll with it.
Yeah.
Thanks for that.
Can I just add something to that, Joanna?
Of course.
You know, as a Buddhist, I believe that everything has good and everything has bad. So even if I'm sort of being forced into a change, I love what you said there. It's up to me to decide how I'm gonna deal with that. So just that sort of consciousness that regardless of the change, there's gonna be good things and there's gonna be bad things, and I'm still gonna be different in a year. Mm-hmm. And it's probably gonna be good because I'm an optimist that way.
Yeah, for sure, definitely. Yeah, it's all about, you have a lot of power and control and choice in your life. And I think a lot of people get really stuck in feeling hopeless and powerless because it's something bigger that's, you know, dictating this change. But you actually have a lot of power and control in any given situation. It's just how you choose to exercise that. And I think a lot of us have gotten into cycles where we give our power away either intentionally or unintentionally based on our reaction to whatever change is happening. Does that make sense?
Can I just add a quick little story, Joanna?
Of course.
I participated on an online conference last Wednesday. It was an Indigenous online conference in the, I don't even know where it is. It was like the northwest corner of Ontario. And I wasn't in the best mood about it because I hate doing this and all that stuff. How am I going to be Mark? And then I hate the change of this in our lives. And then my wife said, you don't have to go to an airport. You don't have to stay in a hotel. You don't have to worry about trying to get a flight back home. You get to go upstairs and present. Changed how I looked at it.
Mhm. Mhm. Yeah, and sometimes it's the people in our circle or within our collective that can be influential to us and help us to shift into a place where maybe we're a little more open and inviting and accepting of change. So there's that too, like who's in your circle. The quality of your life will depend on the quality of your circle. And I used to think that was kind of crap until I really started to unpack that for myself. And any time that I've experienced a lot of negativity in my life or just really unhealthy stuff, it's been because some people in my circle were incredibly negative and or unhealthy. And as soon as I bounced them out, my life got a lot easier and a lot more positive. So you can think of that as well in terms of circles. I see that Margaret Caitlin, that's a cool name. I like two names. She shares, when I think about the circle thing, I think of when you have a bad sleep. It affects your day, your mood, your emotions, and actions. Talking about change, you can change that by going to bed earlier the night before, for example, and that can give you a more positive mood, emotions, and actions the next day. I'm going to go back to that slide because I really like what you said there, like just this one where you're mentioning how one aspect, so your physical aspect, when that is compromised, it completely impacts the other stuff. And I think that's such a beautiful example because if you don't get enough sleep, it definitely impacts your mood and how you think and how you even learn. But then it also impacts your ability to connect to people. So the spiritual aspect talks about connection. So to what your core values and belief system, your idea of spirit, but then how do you connect to yourself and then the people, places, and things? So that gets compromised if you've had a bad sleep. And then, of course, the feelings is always the big aspect of this wheel. Because we're human beings, we have those emotions. I know Mark is super uncomfortable with the feelings. And I don't think that this circle is going to get particularly feely today, Mark, so you're good. You're not going to have to dip and go get a Kleenex box. But the feelings part, that we're definitely talking about your feelings, but more than that, we're talking about your ability to relate to yourself and sort of how you view yourself. And then how do you relate to the people, places, and things in your life on a given day? So if you don't get enough sleep, I love that example because everything is impacted, right? And then we got a hell yes from Amber. I like that. Okay, so now we're going to shift into Indigenous family values. Do you know what? I just want to say, I always feel like I'm winning at life when I do PowerPoints and I find good graphics that go with what we're going to be talking about. Okay, so the first family value we're going to look at is just this idea of caring for one another. So the family, community, and individuals supported and mirrored each other and developed a circle of trust in the 4 aspects of self. So you see them here again in the medicine wheel: the physical, the mental, the spiritual, and emotional. So this really became a foundation for family life and for those values. So again, when we're talking about that spiritual aspect, this is really where we talk about those core values and beliefs. So this framework, the medicine wheel, is what really grounded and bonded families together. Okay, does this make sense? You can just give me a yes in the chat. Thank you, Joffrey. Thank you, Margaret. Looking for a few more yeses. Give me 3 more yeses, and then we'll move on. Okay, perfect. Thank you. So then another family value is sharing with each other. So everything was shared. So material goods, food, shelter, nourishment, and the skill set to attain those things. So again, everything was about the collective. So the focus on the we as opposed to the me. And it included values of teaching the children and youth about the world and how to live in a society where everyone was equal and depended on each other. So again, we talked a little bit about that when we were introducing the medicine wheel, just about the interconnectedness of each of those areas. But that also branches out to people in terms of some of those interconnections that we have with one another and how interdependent we are on one another. And when you look at the medicine wheel, each of these aspects are equal. And so the circle also represents equality. So no person is above or below. Everyone is just together. Does that make sense? You can give me a yes in chat or a thumbs up. Thank you. Okay, so we'll keep going here. So the third tradition, or the third value, is keeping traditions. So Indigenous parents believed in the importance of passing down traditions from one generation to the next through a few different ways. So through rites of passages, and that usually would happen with the different ages. So for young boys, it might be their first hunt. For young girls transitioning into young women, it would be that berry fast when they would start their moon time, so their period, through different ceremonies. So when we think of sweat lodge ceremonies, when we think of fasting, when we think of vision quests, sun dances, all of those had really important teaching aspects to it and passing that history down, and even some of those values and life lessons that children needed. And then, of course, storytelling. So Indigenous people have always been about the oral histories and sharing things through storytelling. So through those stories is where significant life lessons were taught, or maybe some of those really important life skills that kids needed to develop, or even the adults who needed reminding. Does this make sense? You can give me a yes in chat or a thumbs up. I like how some of you put all your names. I like that, like Samantha Jolene, Sir Geoffrey Douglas Hawkes. I love it. Okay, we'll keep going. So the importance of family roles was a really big value. So family members all had specific roles to play. For example, the grandfather could be the storyteller. The uncle could be the teacher of all things outdoors. So some of those outdoor skills they needed, making fire, hunting, trapping, fishing, those types of things. And then an aunt could be seen as the teacher of how to cook said things when they were brought home. And then this one is really important. Children were seen as special gifts from the Creator. So just this idea that children are incredibly sacred and special. And you'll have known through some of your classes learning the history of children throughout the centuries, children really weren't even seen as human. And so I like highlighting this value because it's super important, where children are seen as just these really cool, sacred, special beings and need to be treated as such. Does that make sense? This value of family roles. You can give me a yes in chat.
Can I add something to that, Joanna?
Of course.
I forget where it was. It was somewhere in Ontario, but the word for child is special gift from Creator on loan.
Yes.
That blew my mind. They're not yours.
No.
They're not yours. They're not yours. You are here to take care of them, but they are their own special little being. They're only on loan, where we live in a world where kids are seen as our commodity, that I own them, right? That blew my mind.
Yeah, and we're going to talk a little bit about that in a few more slides. And just this idea is that Indigenous parents were not given the task to shape and mold their children. In fact, it was just really stepping back and allowing children to become who they were destined to be. And sort of building on what you're saying, Mark, is just this idea is that the belief, one of the Indigenous beliefs, is that we come from the star world. And so children choose who they're going to come down to. Like Eurocentric beliefs would have us just believe in like how babies are conceived and stuff like that. But there's such a really cool spiritual aspect to it, where they are choosing the family that they're coming into. So that just builds on what you were seeing. And I like that, really hammering home that children are on loan. They are not yours. They don't belong to you. You are just tasked with creating an environment for them to explore what their destiny is, what their life purpose is, and allow them to explore that fully and allow them to become who they were meant to become. And that's a bit of a challenge for us today, especially because we're so ingrained with that Eurocentric style of parenting, where it's our job, it's our responsibility to raise, healthy, productive, law-abiding citizens. Well, it's so much more than that. They're here because they have a very specific purpose. And if we just create the space and allow them the freedom to explore that, they're going to do some really cool things without our interference. And we're going to talk about interference in a bit. Okay, so now my favorite. We're going to get into traditional child rearing values, and we're going to talk a little bit more about some of these things that we were just talking about. Before we go on to this, are there any questions, comments, or concerns about what we've covered up until this point? No? It's all good?
Well, I can just say I'm loving this, Joanna. I'm absolutely loving this. You're good at this online stuff, sister.
Well, it's taken me a while, but I'm super passionate about this type of stuff, so like Indigenous things. But I also find myself like pretty entertaining. And I think when you left to go to the bathroom, I think is what you were doing, is I really feel like I'm winning at life when I do PowerPoints, because I find, good pictures, or sometimes I put in animations and stuff. And yeah, I just feel like I'm winning at life, winning at this gig of being an instructor. So thank you for that. Okay, so if there's no comments, questions, or concerns, we shall keep moving. Okay, so there are 7 traditional child rearing values. Now, one of the things that I want to say is that this is based on my own teachings and learnings, so they are Anishinaabe, but I also want to recognize that there are so many other nations out there that this is not an exhaustive list, nor is it the be-all and end-all of traditional child rearing values. There's lots of different nations within Canada, and there's lots of interpretations and perceptions of that. So these are just coming from my own teachings and learnings, what I've been shared. Okay, so we have 7 here. So interconnections, which we've talked a little bit about today, love and respect, and you'll notice those are from the 7 sacred teachings. The idea of kinship, independence and non-interference, nurturing and protection, discipline, and teaching. So now what we're going to do is we're going to take a look at those and what do these exactly mean? So we're going to break them down and unpack them. Okay, so the idea of interconnections here. So you can see in this graphic, this represents a medicine wheel. So children are considered part of interdependent connection to all life forms, the environment, and the spiritual world. And then all relationships are interconnected and together create harmony and balance. And that's a big part of the medicine wheel. So when you look at this graphic here, you can see that we have the 4 aspects of self represented here. So physical, mental, spiritual, and emotional. So for the physical aspect, we're really talking about that connection and interconnection to the land. So the land was super important because the land allows us to harvest from it. We hunt, but we also do some significant learning and healing from it as well. When we transition over into the mental aspect, we're talking about the culture and learning those ancestral and cultural ways, and this being a big foundation for creating that harmony and balance within our own circles, within ourselves, but within the collective as well. When we transition into the spiritual aspect, we're really talking about those metaphysical traditions and how do we connect to spirit and what does that look like. And of course, this relates to our core value and belief system, which involves some of those physical traditions. And finally, this final aspect of the emotional aspect, we're definitely talking about feelings, but remember I was telling you before, it's about that idea of relation, and so relationship to community, family, and clan. And when we're looking at this, you can see that there's a lot of interconnections here within the 4 parts, but within these 4 specific examples that I've given you. And those are needed in order to become that higher and best version of yourself. Does this make sense, the value of interconnection? You can give me a yes in chat or a thumbs up, Mark, or come on, Mike, if you want, if you're brave. Okay, so I see a few yeses. Okay, I'd like to see 4 more yeses. There's 1, 2, 3, 4. Perfect. Thank you all. We will keep going. Okay, so the next values are love and respect. And like I said, those really come from the 7 sacred teachings. And I did see some of that mentioned within some of the assignments that I got yesterday. So Indigenous parents are very respectful of their children. Let us take a moment and think about that and let that sink in. Children are seen as people that deserve respect and can make their own decisions and offer their own perspective. This is so important and so crucial. So they are not seen as less than. They are seen as very important members of the family, but more than that, the collective, because they are their own little beings and they have their own perspective, their own gifts and talents and skills that they can contribute to the collective. And so they deserve respect. And that is something in those sort of Eurocentric types of parenting, thoughts on parenting, that doesn't often come through. There's often that divide between us and them. And so we deserve respect from our children because we are the adults and we are the experts. but it doesn't necessarily mean that we reciprocate that respect, where in Indigenous families and some of these values demand that we respect children because they're a special and sacred gift from the Creator, but also because they're little humans and they offer their own beautiful gifts and expertise and skills. So just let that sink in, because this is a really important one. And then all relationships emphasized respect and love, so that idea of doing all things in love. Children understood that they were valued and thus had value and respect for life. So when that is mirrored for you, then you can internalize that for yourself, and that's about that messaging you give to yourself. So the mental aspect on the medicine wheel really talks a lot about our thinking, how we view ourselves, so those self-concepts, self-esteem, self-value, self-worth, self-confidence, and of course the language, but not just the language that we speak, but the language that we use with ourselves and the messaging that we give ourselves. A calling to become and not be shaped by family. So family provided a context for its expression. So just creating that safe space within the family, within the collective, for children to really explore who they're meant to be and to freely do that without interference. It was important to cooperate and to share and show respect for elders. So by elders, we mean the older people in the family and the collective. There has been this shift away from calling wisdom and knowledge keepers elders, because elders really comes from some of those branches of organized religion where they have those roles within those groups. And so there's been a shift, at least in the province of Manitoba, where people who were given that title of elder have now requested to be referred to as wisdom or knowledge keepers, just so that there is a separation from any of those organized religions. And that's done with tremendous respect to those other religions and not taking that title on. And then finally, children were taught to show courtesy to others and to always listen with their hearts. So this emphasized on heart learning. So that, of course, engages that emotional aspect, but really just being able to tap into that freely and without judgment. So without judging themselves and without being judged within their family unit and within the collective. Any comments or questions about these two values? Go ahead, Mark.
Can I throw in one? My father helped me write my entrance essay to get into early childhood education.
Nice.
I knew nothing about kids. So my father sat down with me and he said to me, we are going to answer this based upon what I learned working in the Arctic. It was all this stuff. When he came back from the Arctic, he said, I'm a different guy. The kids have so much freedom. The kids have so much respect. The parents allow the child to sometimes do the wrong thing and then learn something from it. And so I got into ECE because of my dad's interpretation on child rearing values from the Arctic. So it has a very important place for me. I love your bit here, a calling to become. I hope everybody thinks about that one hard, because that doesn't just reflect, how children are raised within Indigenous communities, but it's also why not borrow some of this stuff and think about our own work as we're just helping a kid become. That's it. Just become.
Yeah, and I think that's a really important word to emphasize just around becoming, because so much of Eurocentric, Euro-Western, and even Euro-Canadian values are about shaping kids to become what we want them to be, what we desire them to be. And really that's selfish of us, because we have no business dictating to another human being what they should and ought to be doing with their lives. We should be creating space and holding space for them to become who they need to become, and understanding that they're going to become different versions of themselves several times throughout their life as they start to hone their destiny and their life purpose. So I like how you're emphasizing that word become, because it's so important. And absolutely adopt some of these values. And of course, you're going to make them make sense for yourself and based on your own core values and belief systems. But this is good stuff, and it's really transferable and it's versatile to whomever you happen to be and whatever you're bringing to the table. So thanks for that, Mark. Okay, does this make sense? You can throw a yes up in chat or a thumbs up. Oh, 2 thumbs up, 2 excited thumbs up from Mark. I like it. Okay, so I'm seeing some yeses, so we're gonna move on. Only once have I done a presentation where someone's like, none of this shit makes sense. And I'm like, all right then. Let's unpack that. Okay, our next value is kinship. And that seems to be a big word that's coming out on the scene right now, especially in child welfare, with this idea of kinship. So let's take a look at it. Let's unpack it. So family includes all extended family, and even family who isn't considered to be biological. And I think we all have experiences where we have, you know, like our chosen family. I don't know about you, Mark, but I have always lived away from my family as an adult. So I have a lot of chosen family who I choose to surround myself with, because all of my family lives quite a bit of distance away from me and I don't get to interact with them as much. So that is a very broad definition of extended family. So it includes everybody. So caring for a child was the responsibility of all family members, and educating the child was the responsibility of the clan. So something I don't think that was in the learning circle is just this idea of the clan system. So pre-contact, so before European settlers came over, clan system was our governance structure. So each person within the collective was given a clan, and that came through ceremony, so from those spiritual ones. And so part of that raising up of a child was given to the collective, and more than that, to the clan that that child belonged to. So they didn't necessarily belong to the same clan as their parents or other members of their family. So within that clan system, this also helped the child to become, because some of those responsibilities and role within the clan system would lead to that child understanding why they were here on Mother Earth. So this was a collective effort to raise children up. Extended family were always nearby and could help when parents had other responsibilities. So maybe something was going on within the clan family that they needed to attend to. So there was always other people around who could help. Extended families often lived together, and there were always multiple caregivers, which is kind of nice when you think about it. Like, it's a tremendous amount of work to spend time with a baby. I always say babies are, human babies are evolutionary fails, because they're the only species that are completely dependent on another person to meet all their basic needs. Like when you think of when a horse is born, well, that horse is getting up and learning how to walk almost immediately. Human babies can't even lift their heads, and they can't communicate. So it's nice to have those multiple caregivers. And I'm sure those of you who've had to raise babies on your own at different points, it's a lot of work. And children were rarely separated from their family. They were included and took part in everything. So some of these Eurocentric parenting values, I think of weddings and I think of funerals especially. Children are kept away from those because we don't want them to disturb or to be bothersome to people. But in Indigenous families, one of the important values is that we include kids in everything, because there is significant learning and perhaps healing for them to learn. And they might not be sitting beside us and being really studious, but I can give you an example of this. When we host Sundance meetings in our lodge, so in my lodge family, kids are always running around and they're super crazy and they're making all kinds of noise. And I love that. I love chaos kids bring. I find it super entertaining, but I also know that they're learning, even if it doesn't look like they're learning, because they're running around and screaming and doing what kids do best. And then there was this one time when we were actually at Sundance and I was watching, and those kids were playing Sundance. So they were sitting at the drum, they were drumming, they had fans, they were taking each other to the sort of like the sacred tree, and they were fanning each other down, and they were teaching each other some of those teachings that were given throughout the year. And so they're always, always learning. It's so important that they're included because they're our future generation. I feel really good about the littles in our lodge because at such a young age, they're getting it. They're getting it at like 2 years old or less. And that makes me feel really good because it means that our future generations are going to be rooted in these pre-contact, these ancestral ways of being. Does that make sense? This idea of kinship and how it's really inclusive and actually quite extensive. You can put a yes up in chat. Two thumbs up from Mark.
Can I just add one more little father story of the arch?
Yeah.
He was putting up the NORAD system up there, but so he'd have to stay in people's houses because he had a 14-year-old kid with a dog team. It was just him and this kid, and so they hit a storm, and they had to go to this kid's relative or kin somewhere, and they went to the house, a government-made house. And when my father went into it, he noticed that they took out all the posts because everybody wanted to sleep and be together, but the roof was collapsing because they took out all the posts. And my dad said, that's the trouble. When people don't understand how people live, you cannot build houses for someone in southern Ontario and ship it up to the Arctic because they live in a kinship model. Yeah, it was really interesting.
Yeah, when I was working in the States, I worked with a number of folks from the Navajo Nation. And when we were doing overnight shifts specifically, because there's nothing else to do but sit around and talk, I was always fascinated to hear their perspective on kinship. And a little bit shocked when my friend told me that her parents have this like really big bed. It's like beyond a California king. And so when they go home, so they were all adults, they all sleep in their parents' bed. And I thought, oh my God. First off, my parents would never let me and my brothers sleep in the bed. Two, I have no desire to sleep in the same bed as my brothers and my parents. But that was an important part of their child rearing. And then their way of connecting when they would go back home. So I think it's really funny that they're all in their 40s now. And when they go home, they all sleep in their parents' bed. And I thought, that's actually really kind of cool. That's really beautiful and just a really honoring way to everybody in that family. It gets a little crowded when the grandbabies get in there, but I thought that was cool. Okay, so we'll keep moving on to the next value. Oh, these are my favorite. Autonomy and non-interference. So it's kind of building on everything that we've been talking about this morning. So children are encouraged to think independently and experience natural processes and outcomes. Kind of mind-blowing, actually, because some of the Eurocentric, Euro-Western, Euro-Canadian values are we don't allow them to think independently and just to experience life as it happens, right? So this is significant. So remember this point. They're given a great deal of responsibility, but we're not given anything they could not handle beyond their abilities. So there is a lot of belief and trust in kids as being incredibly capable and intelligent. And this idea of them being able to make things make sense for themselves in a way that honors them, not honor like the adults who happen to be teaching them or creating that space for them. It was always about them. Children were permitted to learn from their own mistakes, so allowing them to experience natural processes and outcomes. And so that is really crucial to our learning as human beings, is being able to do something, have it be wildly successful, and learn from that. And then the flip side of that is doing something, having an epic failure, and then learning from that as well. That's significant learning from us. But when you think about how you act with children, both the kids that you work with and maybe your own kids or the kids that are in your life, we have this tendency to interfere 100% of the time. We're always, stepping in at every crucial moment. And when I started getting teachings about child rearing, even though I don't have kids myself, but I spend a lot of time with kids, this was really freeing for me because I could just be like, you know what? I'm just going to be drinking my tea on the couch. Go do you. Go do life. If you are at risk of getting hurt, then I obviously have a duty as an adult to step in. But besides that, I'm just going to let you do you. And then come back and tell me what you're learning or what you did. And it's such a cool way to interact with kids. And I like to think that they appreciate that more. Children are allowed to make their own decisions. Well, what a mind-blowing concept that kids are just little versions of adults and they have the ability to think on their own, to make a decision, and then wait for it, experience natural processes and outcomes, whether it's successful or not. Children are encouraged to live semi-independently with the freedom to experience natural occurrences. I'm not talking about you send your 5-year-old out and allow them to live on their own and do life. But what I'm saying is that they're allowed to go off and be who they need to be in any given moment. And you allow them the space and time and freedom to do that. And then allow them to learn from the experiences that they're creating for themselves. And again, they're either going to be wildly successful or they're going to be epic failures or maybe something in between. And all of that is okay. And all of that is significant and important to their learning and development. Child development practices support minimal to non-interference. So the interruption of children's activities and coercion are avoided within limits. This is where we as adults kind of get it wrong, is that we're always interfering, and we're doing it usually from a good place with good intentions, but it really interrupts and interferes with the learning and development of children because you have taken that away from them. And so there is a bit of disempowerment there. And then you are taking that on and then guiding that experience. And so we do our best to not do that, just allowing kids to do them. And then parents prefer to observe behavior rather than intervene. And again, that's kind of mind-blowing. When I talk to some of the people in my circle about this, and everybody's babies are growing now and they're adults and doing their own lives and have their own kids, we talk a little bit about this and how they wish they knew this when they were parenting, because it would have been a lot easier to be parents if we could just step into this place of observation and allowing kids to really fully bloom into the people they were destined to be and taking that responsibility off us. It's like as parents, you're really taking on a lot of responsibility where an Indigenous worldview and perspective is you don't. You just allow them to become who they're meant to become. Does this make sense? This is often the value that's quite uncomfortable for people, because one of the things that I talk about with non-interference, and Mark would know this from his time sitting in circles with me in person, when I use feelings as an example for non-interference, and this is really transferable to your work with kids. So when people are getting emotional, one of our tendencies is to provide comfort measures. So it could be offering Kleenex, a reassuring pat on the back, or maybe a hug, a side hug, or something that we believe will help the person feel better. But what we've really done is we've interfered with a natural process and outcome for that person, because there is something really significant in that moment where that person is starting to feel their feels. It's actually a good thing, because that energy that's created, whether it's within a circle or otherwise, has really created safety and security for that person, and that person is now ready to address whatever has happened to come to the surface for them. And so we just need to allow them to experience that, so experience that natural process, and then whatever that outcome is going to be, and maybe it lasts for 5 minutes or maybe it's a bit longer, but just this idea of having that tremendous respect and love and care, concern for them, and trusting that they are going to do what they need to do with that. And anytime we provide a comfort measure, we're actually interfering with that process. And in a way, we're disrespecting and we are definitely disempowering them. So we always want to come from a place of empowerment and respect and care, concern, and most of all, love. Does that make sense? I know it really challenges people in terms of how they view their own interactions with people, especially when people are getting emotional. And because we're humans, emotions and feelings are always going to be there. And we're always going to feel some kind of pull to do something for that other person. And it comes from such a really good place, out of really good care and concern for that person. But we're interfering with that natural process and outcome. And so then someone says to me, okay, well, what about kids? What about when kids are crying? Right. I do the same thing I do with kids as I do with adults, and I just let them be. I let them know that I'm there. And so I'll probably come down to their level. I'll sit with them, and I'll just let them know that I'm there. And then I just allow them to do what it is they need to do. And I have to tell you, kids get it far better than adults. And they just experience what they need to experience. They do what they have to do. And then they want to talk about it. And it's not necessarily a huge conversation, but they're so much better at getting in touch with what was going on for them in that moment. And they can identify it, they can articulate it, and they can regulate that for themselves, all without me doing anything. Whereas sometimes adults really struggle with that because that's not something we learned, or we had lots of people interfere and intervene when we were feeling emotional. Does that make sense?
Can I just add something there, Joanna?
Of course.
Your last little point there reminded me of Mark Twain, which you said, I'd much rather talk to children than adults because kids tell you everything they know and then they shut their mouths. but the other thing about this, folks, I hope this hit you guys. In our field, Joanna, everyone's on about a child coming out of these daycare centers in northern Italy. Guess what the image of child is? All this stuff. And we as a field, for some reason, have to go to northern Italy to learn about this. So this isn't new. This is not new to us. It's just they package it as something else. Mm-hmm. This is real. This belongs to us as people living in this country. Thank you for this, Joanna.
Yeah, it's interesting because I find some interesting shifts are happening in perspectives, in relationships, or just the idea of interpersonal relationships. So whether we're looking at business, romantic, with kids, whoever it is, are really starting to look at Indigenous ways of being and doing and learning and thinking and being and feeling, because we're onto something really good. And I always kind of chuckle a bit because this is how we were doing life before the settlers, or as I like to call them, the unsettlers, came over. We had very simple yet complex systems. So we had a health system, we had an education system, we had a child welfare system, a justice system. They just looked different, and they were very honoring and respectful and focused on healing. So this idea of creating balance. And so now, all these hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of years later, it's really interesting to me that now people are starting to pay attention to it because we were on to something. Well, we were always doing this. Things changed for us when the unsettlers came over, and then we were forced to do things differently. So, okay, so this makes sense. I see some yeses up here, so that's good. So we'll keep going. Okay, so the values of nurturing and protection. So it starts with the baby. Like I said, babies are like evolutionary failures here. They feel the safety, closeness, and heartbeat of mom while being held in the cradle board. So the cradle board is just an Indigenous way of carrying a baby. It's like a carrier. The sense of closeness transforms to the heartbeat of the community, so like the drumming, and belonging and being safe and part of kin. So then it extends to the collective, that closeness and that bond and that safety. And then the adults, so all the adults within the family and within the collective, had a responsibility to nurture, care for, and guide, keyword here, guide, children in a variety of ways, the balance of which was best determined by the nature of both the child and the teaching. So again, allowing just some of those natural things that the child was drawn to, so they would match that. And so the idea here was watch, wait, and wisely interact. So again, the values of non-interference and autonomy are coming in here as well, where adults would watch, observe, right, wait, and then wisely interact if they needed to. Do these values make sense? Give me a yes in chat or a thumbs up. Your thumbs up are kind of like the Hawaiian ones. My favorite thing about working with folks from when I was living in Alaska, it was a really cool place to live because there were so many different cultures represented there, and I loved the folks from the South Pacific Islands, and then of course Hawaii, and I just loved their whole vibe. They too are Indigenous, so we had lots of great talks about this kind of stuff. So I see yeses here, so we'll keep going. Okay, and discipline. I think this is our final value, the value of discipline. So discipline was carefully thought out to fit a child's need to understand a specific rule or limit. Notice I didn't say punishment. Punishment is very linear, and it is definitely a very Eurocentric value. Indigenous people don't believe in punishment. We believe in healing. So again, this holistic perspective, this idea of looking at the person as whole. So the wisdom and knowledge keepers within the collective and the community members viewed inappropriate, unhealthy, and harmful behaviors as being unbalanced and in need of help and support. So just this idea that if a child was displaying these types of challenging behaviors, that there was something more going on. So they wouldn't even focus on the behavior, which is quite opposite from what we do here sort of in the Western world, is we've put a lot of focus on a behavior and not where it should be, which is sort of that root cause. And so they're looking at those four aspects of self, the physical, the mental, the spiritual, and emotional, and identifying which part or which parts are out of balance and in need of help and support, and more than that, the healing. So this idea of restoring the balance. And so that was the idea of discipline. It was to never make kids feel bad about themselves. Because when you think about that, when you think about punishment, punishment is really not an effective deterrent. Really, what it does is become quite damaging to a child's image of self and the language that they're using. Where when we look at things from a holistic perspective and we look at where that child needs support in terms of rebalancing out their wheel, that's a much friendlier way of doing it, and they'll learn more from that. Does that make sense? Yeah, if you can just put a yes in the chat. 2 enthusiastic thumbs up from Mark. I love it. Okay, so I only see 2 yeses. Are the rest of you binge watching? If you are, what are you binge watching? Because I will join you later. Okay. Good. Okay, so we'll keep moving on. Okay, so teachings. So wisdom and knowledge keepers told stories and legends that delighted the children, but also gave them valuable information about animals, birds, plants, and the natural world that was critical to their survival. So passing of traditional knowledge. So we talked a little bit about that earlier, just about Indigenous people prefer to use stories as a way to engage and then share those really important life lessons or life skills. Stories were used to instill values, beliefs, and understanding of life experiences. It's a kinder, gentler way of doing it. And of course, teaching children is done through modeling, mirroring, and storytelling and humor. So humor is a big part, obviously not of just Indigenous culture, but it was a really important part because it can't always be serious. And so we need to infuse and embed that humor into things, because laughing is one of the ways that the Creator gave us to heal, but also to learn. So just an important note there. Does this value of teachings make sense? Give me a yes in chat. There's an enthusiastic thumb up from Mark. I'll take it. Yes, this was a quick turnaround with this one. Okay, thanks, folks. So we'll keep going. Okay, so now we're shifting into sort of more present day, and we're looking at working with Indigenous children and families, which is what all of you do. Okay, now you get to do some sharing. So based on the material you covered in your learning circle and what you're learning in this course and the content so far from this morning, what is one idea you have to support children and families you are working with? So I'll just invite you to unmute your mic, or you can put your answer up in chat. So what is one idea you have to support children and families you are working with? Don't all answer at once.
Maybe offer families to participate in like an all about me sort of thing, so that we can learn about families and their different backgrounds, because it's really hard to do that when you're doing a quick pick up and drop off. So maybe reaching out to learn about them.
Yeah, so kind of inviting them into like, basically like a sharing circle. What I love about ECE already is that you utilize circle processes a lot within your centers. So that's a really great way, kind of like a show and tell. Love it. Thank you, Tatiana. Anybody else? Just so you know, I'm not afraid to go down the participant list and call on people. Oh, there we go. That always gets people.
No, I definitely agree with Tat there, saying that it's really hard to really get to know families with the 1, 2, maybe 3 minute conversations we can get at the end of the day or whatever. I personally think it would be super awesome. I was talking about this a while ago there in one of our other classes, to do like a family night where all the families come to the center. We all hang out at the center, or we all pick a place in the park or wherever. It doesn't really matter exactly where it all happens, but pick somewhere where everybody can come together, everybody, all the families from everybody, including the ECEs and everybody that works there, to just do things together. Maybe that means having dinner together, having a movie night, hanging out and playing games. Even just letting the kids all play in one area, in one space together, while all the adults have time to hang out together with the adults, right? It may not necessarily be specifically kids over here and adults over here. It's time to talk, right? But let it flow the way it needs to flow.
Definitely. I love that idea. It's just that idea about cultivating community and connection is so important, and really part of another set of values for Indigenous people, but not just exclusively, but that's important. Thanks, Heidi. I see here Haley says she's agreeing with, I'm guessing, Heidi, a little fam jam barbecue. Yes, I love that expression, fam jam. And Kate is agreeing with that as well. Any other?
Can I add something, Joanna?
Of course, Mark.
I'm not working in childcare, but I'm working in this medium, teaching folks. And I don't know if you guys noticed something about my PowerPoints and stuff like that, but I try to have pictures of people represented in my stuff. I want people to be able to go through my PowerPoints and go, hey, that person looks a little bit like me. And I think based upon the stuff you gave us to review, really reinforced that for me about the value and importance in making sure that people are represented when we come together in a community, like in a classroom, that they're represented there. You know, whether it's an image of them or there's something that folks can connect with on a metaphysical level or a physical level.
Definitely. That's such a good point, Mark, and that's important. And there's actually been research studies done on that in terms of just having good representation, whether we're looking at ECE or any other of the industries, is how important it is to have people who look like you, you know, working with, you know, your kids or yourself or whoever it is. And so never discount that. And that's why I love human services, is because, and especially within Manitoba, because we have so many amazing cultures and backgrounds that are represented here. Like I think of Folklorama and how many pavilions we get to showcase. It really is like the whole world coming to Manitoba because we have that many cultural groups represented here. How important it is and how cool it is that we have this representation. And obviously in this PowerPoint this morning, because we're talking about Indigenous people, we have Indigenous people highlighted within, you know, some of the graphics and some of the pictures. But that's really important to remember, is that who you are as individuals is really significant, and you're going to make a really positive impact and difference in the kids and the families that you're working with, because you will all work with people from your own background or from your own country if you're a newcomer or immigrant to our country here in Canada. So I like that, Mark, because that's really important. But it's also backed by science, because they've done a lot of research about that in terms of what happens internally for kids or for people when we see someone who's like us. There's some cool things that happen within our brains, and it releases all the feel-good chemicals within our brain, and we start to make that connection. We're going to talk about this in a little bit, but this idea of relationship-based practice and how important that is. And that's a really important value in the Indigenous culture, is we are relational people. And so it's really important that when you're working with Indigenous people, children, youth, families, whomever, is that you take time to cultivate a relationship. Because whatever things that you have to do, whatever tasks, or if you have to check off boxes, you know, for some kind of something, it's really important that you take time to connect with people as humans, because then that makes that buy-in a little bit easier for whatever it is that you need to have them do. Okay, so that's important. That's actually something I spend a lot of time when I go guest lecture at U of M at the law school, and I'm dealing with a group of people who their favorite thing to do is argue. That's why they're becoming lawyers. And so this idea, because we have overrepresentation in all of these systems of Indigenous people, to me, the one thing that I want you to walk away with is that you have to cultivate relationship first. So if I'm your client and we're going to court, you best talk to me as a human being. You better talk to me about something meaningful, because I will not go along with your game plan if you don't talk to me as a human being. And that's really important. Cultivating connection, cultivating relationship. We're going to talk a little bit more about that in just a few minutes. Okay. Amber shares here. I see it came up in chat. Laughing is healing and learning. Children learn through play and fun. A shared laugh with someone's children and their parents is an openness and connectiveness. Ooh, I like that. Things should definitely be fun and should always incorporate humor, because that helps us to connect. And again, that helps us to cultivate that relationship with one another. Does anyone else have answers? Please don't make me bring up the participant list and start calling on people. I'm not afraid to do it. It's just not my preferred way of doing things. I will give you time to type if that's what you're doing. So I'm teaching a course right now. It's group facilitation for CYC students. And so one of the things that we do is we're talking about feelings and stuff like that. It's a smaller group. They're divided into a couple of different groups just so that we can create that that intimacy and that safety and connection. And I like it. I've not had to call on one single person yet. They're not afraid to come on camera and really just be vulnerable. So that's my preferred way, people just volunteering to participate. Are y'all binge watching again, or are you doing laundry? Are you eating? I always like that. I always support when people are eating food. I know there's a lot of material we're working through. Oh, is someone talking?
Well, something that personally I know that I need to work on, I'm very awkward. So when talking with the families and stuff, if they send a child with something that we're like, oh, that's different, or if they want us to do something different, or if they do something different, and, people kind of think, oh, that's strange. Like, my coworker is great at knowing how to bring that up with the families, knowing how to ask, like, politely, like, oh, trying to just get to know them better, whereas I kind of struggle with figuring out how to bring those types of things up. I don't know, it's just something that I need to work on, but I guess just not being afraid to ask questions and stuff with the families would be an idea to support them.
Yeah, that's a great point. So are you talking about, so just so I can understand, so like families are sending something with kids, or are you talking about if something happens, or both?
I'm struggling to think of a good example. I used an example, might not be a great one, in a previous class, but it's like families that like bundle their kids up warm when it's really not that cold outside. And I know that oftentimes is people that come from a place that is warmer, so to them it feels very, very cold here, so they bundle them up.
Right.
So like that's an example I know kind of the answer to, but like if there was a situation like that I didn't know why the family was doing that, like my coworker is great at, talking to the families and bringing that kind of stuff up, but that's something I need to work on.
Okay, that makes sense to me. So I'm going to give you two phrases, and they're pretty short, and they're pretty versatile. I use them a lot in counseling, and especially when I'm dealing with awkward situations or just really terrible, horrible, no good, very bad situations. So the first one is tell me more. So it's just inviting dialogue. So you can fill in the rest. Tell me more about this. And then the second one is help me to understand. So you're inviting the other person or group of people to teach you about whatever is going on. So if it's a kid who's really bundled up or if it's something else. Those are two phrases you can use. I will put them up here in chat. So tell me more and help me to understand. And they're applicable to ECE because, again, there's lots of things that happen within the day within your center where you need a little more information or you're seeking to understand. And the only way that you're going to do that is if you ask questions or you use phrases like this where they're not quite questions, but it is inviting dialogue and interaction with the person or, the group of people. Does that make sense, Margaret?
Yeah, that makes sense. And I'll write those notes down because I appreciate the input there.
Yeah, they're just really good. They're super versatile. You can use them in any industry. And again, it's just focusing on cultivating that connection and that relationship, but also getting the information that you need so you understand what's going on.
Right. Okay, thank you.
Great, thank you. Okay, so a couple things came up here in chat that I want to acknowledge. So Kate shares, we have a family tree at my work with pictures of all the children and their families. Ooh, I like that. That's a great idea. Helps to create a sense of community, definitely, and belonging. I'm not a real big fan of Maslow's hierarchy of needs because, again, that's very Eurocentric, and it's hierarchical, obviously. And so one of the things from Eurocentric values is the triangle, like that represents hierarchy. But for Indigenous people, it's the circle where everybody is equal. There isn't this idea of there's people at the top and there's people at the bottom. But one of those needs that Maslow identified with that sense of belonging. So I like what you're doing in your center, Kate, because that really speaks to that sense of belonging and that sense of community. And Haley shares, that those phrases are helpful in regards to talking to parents. Yeah, parents are tricky to talk to, especially when it comes to talking about their kids because they take things personally. So those are two really good phrases to just help. They're kind, they're gentle, they're coming from a place of respect. And honestly, in my almost 30 years of working with people, those two phrases are the most helpful. And I learned them, like in school and then through a couple of other different workshops I had to do for my own professional development when I was working in the field. So yes, use them. They're helpful. Any other answers for this question? Any other ideas? No? Okay, so we'll keep going. Okay, so working and supporting Indigenous children and families. So the practice of working with Indigenous families has many complexities and carries a historical legacy. This is why it is so important that you continue your learning on the true relationship that Canada has had with Indigenous people, because it's significant in terms of how you're going to learn to interact with them. Because as an Indigenous person, and I've grown up in different parts of Canada, I've lived in different places, I've lived beyond Canada, as an Indigenous person, there's been a lot of non-Indigenous people in my lifetime who have treated me really badly because I'm Indigenous. And so it is so important that you learn about those historical traumas, which then relates to the collective trauma, which relates to the intergenerational and multi-generational trauma, and then, of course, learning about those contemporary traumas that are happening today. Because it is significant in understanding why Indigenous people are the way that they are. It's not because we're stupid or we're lazy or we don't want to get over things. It's very hard to get over something when it's continuing to happen still today in the society that we have. So it's super important that you understand the historical implications and the contemporary implications. The work of supporting families cannot be done alone. So you as ECEs are one of many critical service providers that surround the family. So we have to have that recognition that Indigenous families are involved with lots of other people, because generally they have a lot of systems involvement. Now that's not always, but for the most part, and especially in my own experience working in the different sectors of human services, is that the families are bringing a lot of other professionals to the table that are supporting them or working with them. So it's important to recognize that. There is a great deal that you as ECEs and families need to learn together. And this work begins with establishing relationships based on mutual respect. And so some of the stuff we've been talking about today and some of the things that you've shared are really good ways to start establishing that respect and cultivating those relationships. And when working with Indigenous families, there is a need to recognize that this is an ongoing learning process, and humility, so there's another one of our 7 sacred teachings, is required. So just that idea of being humble to the children and families, those Indigenous children and families that you're working with, being humble to the profession that you're working with, and humble to the historical context for Indigenous people. And just recognize that we are all learning a new view of the world. Does this make sense? Any comments, any questions about this? If you want to just give me a yes in chat to let me know that this is making sense for you. I see 2 thumbs up from Mark, so we're good. Okay, good. These are really important points, so I hope that you'll take this into consideration. Okay. So if we're going to be talking about working with Indigenous children and families, one of the things that we have to talk about is trauma-informed and sensitive approaches. From an Indigenous perspective, trauma-informed care is a strength-based, person, family, and community-centered approach which starts with an understanding of trauma, its prevalence among service users, so we're talking about children and families here, and its potential impacts on holistic health. So holistic health is those 4 areas, physical, mental, spiritual, and emotional, and then the impacts on behavior, so things people say and things people do, and then relationships. So this graphic I put up here belongs to Dr. Martin Brokenleg, and it's from the Circle of Courage. And if you're not familiar with this program, I would suggest that you consult the Oracle, consult Google, put in Circle of Courage, and it will bring this up because this is a really good way, it's an easy way to incorporate trauma-informed and sensitive approaches in a way that's child-friendly, but also takes into consideration that holistic perspective and the idea of balancing out these 4 areas and the idea of the collective. And when all of these things are happening, so belonging, mastery, generosity, and independence, you start to create self-determined kids. And when people are self-determined, they're more free to explore their life purpose and destiny. So check it out. I'll put it up here in chat, Circle of Courage. If you go on to the province of Manitoba's website and you key in Circle of Courage in the search engine, it will actually bring up a really cool graphic and really simple explanation of what it is. Okay, does this make sense? Give me a yes in chat. Okay, excellent. So we're going to just spend a couple of minutes here on principles of trauma-informed care. This is really significant, and I'm not sure, Mark, how many centers, and for those of you who are in centers, how much of your policies and procedures and just practices within the center are trauma-informed. I don't know if this is something that ECE has jumped on yet. Do you know, Mark? Oh, thanks for the link, by the way.
We're doing at least from a training perspective, we're doing a little bit. Where I'm seeing a lot of stuff on trauma-informed care is in workshops through conferences, through associations in early childhood. It's rare to go to a conference nowadays without a topic on this.
Yeah, I think it's a little bit slower to come into centers. Like I recognize that individuals will do maybe some of these trauma-informed practices, but this is really important, and this is significant to Indigenous people, again, because of that historical trauma, the collective trauma, multi-generational and intergenerational trauma, and then, of course, the contemporary trauma. So there are 6 principles of trauma-informed care, and this comes from a U.S. website. There's substance abuse and mental health website in the States, but these are really good. And so the first one is safety, so obviously about creating a safe space for people to be. The second one is trustworthiness and transparency, so just this idea that people are understanding why you're doing the things that you're doing and you're not afraid to share those with them. The third one is peer support. So when we're looking at peer support, we're looking at so the children as peers, but also you and your colleagues as ECEs as well. So ensuring that you're creating a really good collective for both the children and families that you're working with and yourself as professionals. The fourth one is collaboration and mutuality, and I just want to focus on the idea of collaboration. So collaboration is that idea of engaging in meaningful dialogues with people and using their feedback and input. One of the things that has often happened, especially with Indigenous people, is consultation. And really consultation is just lip service. I'm going to ask you questions, I'm going to get your feedback, and then I have no intention of doing anything with it. I'm just checking off a couple of boxes that I need to. So this idea of creating that collaboration, so allowing people to own that process and to share feedback. And then that idea of mutuality is that we're honoring the fact that every single person that we're coming in contact is their own expert and has their own expertise that we need to foster and nurture, but also honor as well. The fifth one is empowerment, voice, and choice. So just this idea is that we're creating environments where people feel empowered, they feel comfortable and safe enough to use their voice and speak their truth, and that they have the freedom to choose. And then finally, we have cultural, historical, and gender issues. And you're doing some of that work now within this circle this morning, but the online circle material that you had to work through in terms of just educating yourself about that. And then on top of these 6 principles, we need to have 4 key elements present. So the first is realizing the impact of trauma. So you're starting to learn about that. You recognize the signs and symptoms of trauma, and especially when we're talking about littles, a lot of that comes out in challenging behaviors. And so a big part, if you remember from our time together in Melinda's class, when we were looking at challenging behaviors, we were looking at the root causes of that. Okay, the root causes are really important because once we address those, everything else shakes out and goes back into balance. You respond by integrating knowledge about trauma into policies, procedures, and practices. So this is where the field of ECE needs a little more time and assistance and work in terms of bringing that back into the centers and all of the everyday things, so the practices, but then a little more globally around the policies and procedures. And finally, you resist re-traumatizing individuals that you're working with. And a big part of that is not talking about the trauma pieces all the time, because that in itself can be quite triggering and quite traumatizing for people. Do these principles of trauma-informed care make sense? You can just give me a yes in the chat. So something to really start considering and taking forward with you into your centers, especially if you are working with Indigenous people. But I also want to acknowledge that some of our newcomer populations have had some incredible trauma in their home countries. So this isn't just for Indigenous people. This is for everybody. Okay? Okay, so now we're going to look at the medicine wheel through the lens of relationship-based practice. So we've done quite a bit of talking about today about relationship and cultivating relationship and connection. So you'll see that we have the 4 aspects of self represented here. So the physical, the mental, the spiritual, emotional. Now we're going to just unpack what that looks like from a relationship-based lens and how do you put that into practice. So for the physical aspect, we have that idea of humanness. Are you able to connect to the children and families that you're working with as a human being? So not necessarily being focused on those tasks or practices that you have to get done, but really taking the time to connect with them as fellow human beings. That's so, so crucial. That's the number one thing in terms of working from a relationship-based practice. As we transition into the mental aspect, we're talking about reflection and we're talking about being able to create opportunities first and foremost for yourself, but also creating space for the kids and families that you're working in where you're allowing the time, space, and freedom for people to reflect. It could be reflecting about a certain behavior, so something that was said or done, or just reflecting about life in general. And of course, for kids, we're also looking at that sort of that sense of purpose and that sense of destiny. So allowing them time, space, and freedom to explore that. As we transition into the spiritual aspect, first and foremost, how are you honoring that for yourself? What is your practice or your practices that allow you to connect to spirit? Are they faith-based? Are they spiritual-based? Are they a combination of different things? Or does it have nothing to do with any of that, and it's in just how you choose to do life? I give the example, for me, brewing a cup of tea is a real spiritual practice. I do have my core values and beliefs rooted in spirituality, but for me, going to our local tea shop well before COVID and, getting to smell the different loose leaf teas, picking the ones that really sort of spoke to me. And then when I come home, that whole process of making a cup of tea, like I've got a favorite kettle, boiling the water, getting the tea ready is really a spiritual practice for me, and it's just one way that I can honor myself. So what are those things that you're doing to honor that spiritual aspect, first and foremost for yourself, but then how are you creating those opportunities for the children and families and your colleagues that you're working with to honor that spiritual aspect? And then finally, as we transition into the emotional aspect, we're certainly talking about feelings and being able to create the time, space, and freedom for yourself to get in touch with your feelings, but also the kids and families that you're working with. But more than that, we're talking about passion. So how do you know and how do you show that you're passionate about the work that you're doing? And how do you create time, space, and freedom for the children and families that you're working with to cultivate that passion and helping them to discover what that passion is? So this is just a different view using the medicine wheel as we apply it to relationship-based practice. Does that make sense? Okay. Thanks for your note, Joffrey Douglas Hawks. Go pick up your daughter. Thanks for your presence and energy here this morning. It's a pleasure to have you in circle. We're almost done, folks. This actually might be the last slide. Oh, no, we have another one. Okay. So how do we do all of what we've talked about this morning? Specifically, we're looking at also relationship-based practice, is we want to provide opportunities each day for children and youth to nurture their 4 parts. But more than that, allowing yourself to nurture your 4 parts too. Because you can't do for another person what you aren't willing or haven't done for yourself. So for the physical, we're talking about the body, of course, and then the physical spaces, places, and environments you find yourselves in. The mental aspect, we're talking about thought process. So how do you think? How do you process your self-talk, your self-concepts, learning, creativity, imagination. So really providing opportunities to nurture those aspects of the mental aspect. The spiritual, we're talking about the core values and belief systems and how do we honor those and stay true to those, and how do we honor that value system and belief system within the center and the profession that we're working in, and how do we honor that for the kids and families we're working for. And of course, we're talking about the connection to self, first and foremost, but then the people, places, and things in our life as well. And then finally, the emotional piece. Big thing is feelings. As humans, we feel feelings all the time, every day. So how do we create space to develop our awareness, to develop our emotional intelligence? And really importantly is how do we develop emotional fitness? And how do we train ourselves to be okay with our feelings and to create that space for ourselves, but also for the people, places, and things in our lives? And then, of course, we're talking about relationship here. What is your relationship with self? How do you nurture that and foster that? And then the relationships with people, places, and things in your life and in the lives of the children and youth that you're working with. It sounds like a big task, but there are, simple things that you can do. One thing can cover off all, 4 aspects. So it's really challenging yourself to think about those ways that you can bring this into your center and how you can nurture that for the children and families and yourself and your colleagues. So does this make sense? Can I just get a yes from students in the chat?
Can I just add something real quick here?
Of course.
This is, come on, folks. These are all the qualities that every single kid needs in an adult in our daycare centers, in our families, and in our community. So not only have you sort of tied everything all together about opportunities for the kids, it's a beautiful reminder of who are we in their lives, which is always a question that I have in my work with kids, and you've just answered it here.
Mm-hmm. Definitely. And then again, just this idea of being able to be kind and gentle and compassionate with ourselves and being able to nurture these 4 aspects of ourselves, because like I said just a little bit earlier, is if you can't do that for yourself, you are going to really struggle with doing this for another person in a really genuine and authentic way. I don't know if I had another slide. I think so. Shoot, this presentation just keeps going and going. I was on a roll apparently. Okay, so we have this slide and one more slide, and they're both talking about ideas to support Indigenous families. So one of the things that you can do is establish a culturally safe environment. So the effects of colonization can produce barriers to relationship building. Understanding a person's cultural perspective can facilitate the development of a relationship. There's that word again. A key starting point to establishing a culturally safe environment. So a culturally safe collective is based on cultivating a relationship and a connection. The second thing you can do is learn about the true history of Canada's relationship with Indigenous people and how that has interrupted childhoods and parenting. The impacts of colonization have been significant and can still be seen and felt today, plus it's still happening. An essential starting point in working with Indigenous families is recognizing that there are different ways to raise children. Indigenous culture is rich in ways to raise healthy children. So again, you're doing some of that work already. You're learning about the really uncomfortable truth of Canada's history with Indigenous people, and that's really key. Third thing, use a holistic approach. So everything we've been talking today, rooting stuff in the medicine wheel, if you want to call it a wellness wheel, a balance wheel, it's all the same. And it's not specific to Indigenous people because every single person on Mother Earth has a body, has a mind, has a spirit, and has emotions. So families need a holistic approach to address the many issues they are facing, including caring for their children. This approach recognizes that people have 4 distinct parts and often complex needs. And using a holistic approach is a really good way to figure out and nurture some of those needs. And finally, use practices that promote the circle. And that's why I love ECE, because you already naturally use circle processes. And that's really important to honoring a lot of different cultures, not just Indigenous culture. So circle processes can be used for teaching, learning, sharing, celebrating, and problem solving. And so I really encourage you to think about that, how you can incorporate more circle processes into the work that you do with all children and their families. And that's it. That's all I've got for you today. Any comments, questions, or issues with the content that I've shared with you this morning? Does it make sense? Has this been a useful use of your time this morning? It's okay if it's not. I won't be offended.
I was absolutely captivated. You know, I can feel my brain get heavier every time I participate in something like this with you. You know, Joanna, if I can just say, I wrote down a couple of things, but if I can just say who you are and how you teach and how you shared this with us all, it was humanness, tons of opportunities for us to be reflective. I need to go for a walk after this to think about some of the muddled thoughts that I have in my brain. It was all deep in spirituality, and it was, oh my God, your passion is outrageously amazing. If I can say one thing, I don't know if you guys, again, I want to go back to Murray Sinclair, Justice Murray Sinclair's thing about the 7 generations. And I don't know if anybody else thought about that while you were listening to Joanna talk today. What kind of country would we be living in today if we never colonized? What kind of country, what kind of people would we be if we didn't have residential schools and built partnerships with people and took in the values? I was writing down some of his stuff. We'd be a country of balance. We'd be a people of interdependence and understanding that. We'd honor all life stages. We wouldn't be in this bullshit that we have. Sorry, Boo. This bullshit that we have with our elderly dying in long-term care facilities, we would not be in this situation. We would have respect. We would value humor, which people have brought up, which we really, really need. And most importantly, we'd be a country and people that value family. So your presentation today connected so beautifully with what you provided with us yesterday. It's been very holistic for me, Joanna. I have sat in many of these things from other people, but for some reason today, a lot of things just fired for me. So I appreciate that about you, Joanna. I absolutely do.
Thanks for that, Mark. I really appreciate that. Yeah, I'm super passionate, obviously, about Indigenous perspectives, but more than that is working with other professionals in human services and how best can we work together to create a better future for not only Indigenous people, but for everybody in Canada, so we become a better nation. And like I said earlier, one of the best ways we're going to do that is through individuals. We need to recognize that as much as we want to smash the colonial patriarchy and the systems that it brings, it's going to take a really long time to do that. But what we can do is impact individual change, which is important because maybe some of those individuals that we're impacting are really the movers and shakers in those power positions, and maybe we'll start to see some of that change. And it's already happening. It's happening at a turtle's pace or sometimes the pace of a sloth or a snail, but it's forward moving, but it needs a little more momentum. So we need to be having more intentional conversations with each other. We need to be willing to get uncomfortable, especially when we start looking at the truth about Canada and its relationship and treatment of Indigenous people. And we need to start really challenging our own core values and beliefs and just admitting that we have biases and that we have maybe stereotyped or we've discriminated or we've been racist towards not just Indigenous people, but people of color as well. So I get that it's a lot of information, the stuff from the Learning Circle, the stuff that we're talking about today. So I'm very appreciative of your time, your energy, your participation, and just your willingness to be here. Because I recognize that you don't have to be here, especially with this new shift in online learning. You could very well just sign on and we would never know. But by your participation in chat and some of the dialogue that we had this morning, I'm very grateful to you for being willing to be here this morning and to participate in this experience together.
Well, thank you, Joanna. Does anybody else want to say a thank you or anything, or just anything there?
Any comments or questions about what you've seen this morning or what you had to view in preparation for our time together this morning? It's a lot, and I know that I'm someone who likes to go away and process, and I usually have all kinds of aha moments and questions later on. So you have my email address. I'm also available on Teams, through the chat feature. So please reach out if there's something that you want to discuss. I'm always willing to have conversations, and I'm pretty funny, so there would be humor involved with it. So don't be afraid to reach out and connect if you want to.
Brutally funny. My God, if people knew half the things you and I would talk about. Oh, my God. I think Heidi's got something. Her mic came on.
Yeah. Go ahead, Heidi.
I know Mark was commenting earlier and said he hoped that I'd end up sharing with you what I had said earlier in the class when you weren't here yet. And that was just in regards to the fact that I think it's awesome as to how Indigenous people view people around them, be that young, old, middle-aged, adults, whatever, and that everybody has their own opinions and values and things that they want to teach. And a lot of adults nowadays are very much focused on only learning from people who have that educational background in that specific subject that they're looking to learn from, right? And that I think it's pretty awesome that it's more so if adults were to take a few minutes and slow down and think about what's going on around them and the people that are around them, because these people have things that they're looking to teach and wanting to teach and aren't going to just say, hey, yeah, there, buddy, we got something we want to teach you. they're going to be, hey, I'm going to go do this. Would you like to come join me? And that's your opportunity to then learn from them as to what they're doing and how they're doing that specific act and whatnot. It may not be what you're seeking out at that current moment and point in time, but it may be something that they're seeking that they think that you should know. Be that from young or old. And sometimes it's just a matter of taking a minute and slowing down and actually being with those people and learning things that you may not necessarily know that you need to be learning at that current point in time.
Oh, I like that perspective. It really talks about, sort of universal intervention and just really serendipitous moments where you happen along someone's path and they have something significant to share with you. Like, nothing that happens in our lives is coincidence. We meet people at certain points for that exact reason that you're talking about, is that there's something that you need to learn. There's something from that person that you're going to need for your own life journey. So it's really about stopping, pausing, being able to engage fully in that moment. I like that. That's really beautiful.
Thank you.
Thanks, Heidi.
Well, there's something there in the chat there from Margaret.
That's a paragraph. So Margaret Caitlin shares. I'm not sure why this.
It's Catlin. Hey, Joanna, it's Catlin, for heaven's sakes. Get it right.
My bad.
I made the same mistake.
I always think of that show where it's a black teacher and he's in a classroom where there's lots of different people, and I can't remember what the show is called, but he's
Ian Peel, the substitute teacher. Hey, Aaron.
Yeah, the name's Aaron, and he's like, Aaron?
Aaron?
Yeah, pronouncing stuff. That's my biggest fear of, like, being an instructor, is, like, half the time I don't know how to pronounce your name. It's a lot of anxiety for us as instructors. Okay, let's try this again. So from Margaret, she shares, I'm not sure why this stuck with me, but the slide when you talked about the community's heartbeat and how the drumming relates to that. Once the child and the mother are not physically connected, the drumming still connects people and makes them feel safe with their community. I thought that was neat because I've always heard the drumming at ceremonies and stuff, but never knew why that was significant. So thank you for that. What a powerful observation. I love that, because you're right, the amount of time that we spend within the womb is really short, and so there needs to be something that helps us to connect to the collective, but also helps us to guide us back to the collective if we ever leave. So that's really powerful, really beautiful. Thank you for that, Margaret. Oh my God, you guys are so funny. Everyone knows that show, Denise. Love it. Anything else that people would like to share before I dip and go watch some Netflix? No? Well, thank you so much for your energy, your presence, your participation this morning. I get that this is a lot of stuff to have to work through. So again, if you feel like later on, if you're having some aha moments or you have a question, please don't hesitate to reach out and connect with me. I always enjoy that. I'm always in for a good discussion, and I'm funny as fuck, so it would be good. Whatever. I'm sure Hazel has heard the swear words before. And Hazel, thank you. If you're still listening, thank you for your presence today. And I hope you found the presentation helpful and somewhat humorous. And Amber, thanks for creating that opportunity and the space and freedom for her to do that. Anything else?
I think that's it, Joanna.
That's it.
What a morning. She loves it. Thank you. What a morning, Joanna. Thanks again. I want to thank everybody, the students, with your thinking and your, exactly what Joanna had said, just participating and taking stuff in. Joanna, I've given 2 days of work days, so I've asked everybody to sort of take the afternoon off and just sort of think about your presentation today, do some reflection that way. So let's use that. Hey, Joanna, on another note, have you watched Why Women Kill?
No, sounds intense.
Oh, it's really good. I got so into it. It's it's directed by Lucy Liu. It's fantastic.
I've seen it. Yeah, I've seen it scroll past and stuff. I'm super mindful of the stuff that I'm watching now, especially because I'm spending all my time at home, no distractions with commuting to campus and stuff. And I'm involved right now with a pretty intense court case. So anything that's sort of court related, I'm really mindful of what I'm watching because I'm aware that the court case is pretty taxing for me, and so I need to be careful. But I'm going to add it to my list, and once I work through the court stuff, it might be a good thing to watch after everything has wrapped up.
I think you'd love it. It takes place in one house over 3 time periods. It's very clever. It's very clever.
Sounds good. I like Lucy Liu.
Me
I think
too.
she's genius.
Me too. Okay.
Have a good afternoon.
Yes, thank you, Joanna. And again, I'm just going to say good afternoon to everybody here. I won't do my individual one as I usually do. I'm sure you want to get off your lunch. I want to thank you. This was a beautiful day. I don't mean to feel a little selfish, but I really needed this day, and I appreciate it. I appreciate Joanna and her wisdom, and all you guys. I wish you all a beautiful weekend. I hope you're surrounded by people you love. I hope we remember what's really, really important for us all. I hope we do a lot of thinking about what was brought up today and connect some dots, or maybe have way more questions. That would be really cool too. And most of all, I just hope you have fun this weekend. All right. Much love. Give me about a good hour and a bit to get this uploaded, because it's going to take a bit of time for it to upload to YouTube, okay? So I'll write a little note in Teams that when it's all set up, and then you can refer back to this later. All right. Thank you, Joanna White.
All right. Great to spend time with you, Mark. Take care.
Take care, everybody.